Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if rwby watch Naruto and Sasuke vs Kaguya. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by AzaTheAuthor and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. They had lost. The two of them looked on in shock at what they had seen occur before them. Their female teammate standing beside them with tears pouring down her cheeks, her eyes glistening with the sorrow and the pain of knowing they had lost. Their mentor, dead to the world as he gazed upon the faces of friends and allies alike. Dead. Gone. Nothing, but Zetsu the Ravenet was in a rage. Cutting down the same visage again and again and again with lighting arsing across his blade, but he just watched. He just watched and knew. They had lost. Fate was a fickle thing he had come to learn that day. Perhaps Neji was right after all in how one cannot escape it. After all, it seemed all fate had for him was to lose and lose. Even after disengaging the jutsu that Madara has ensnared the world with. The truth was so obvious to them, the shinobi world was over. Completely and absolutely. Poor Naruto himself had watched as the Zetsu were cut apart by a rageful Sasuke. As Sakura's heart broke for the lost comrades and loved ones in Kakashi. His heart went out to the man who had disappeared mere days later. No amount of clones he sent out after the man would find him, but he knew the man was better than to have taken his own life, and so he took solace at that. Despite what it seemed like on the battlefield, the roots of the god tree had yet to reach to any of the main villages, and so when the ensnaring gaze of the scarlet moon was lifted, those who were not at battle were freed to learn the truth. The truth that they had failed. Oh, there was hate. Poor Sakura now understood the veil of disdain that he and Sasuke lived with into their early adulthood. But at least she had Sasuke there to comfort her. Yes, knowing the two had gotten together in the mountains off of Iowa brought a chuckle to the blonde when he first found out. The two seemed to also be ensnared by fate in their own way. Without Kage, without shinobi to teach the ways of ninjutsu to the civilians. There was no shinobi left. Samurai took over within the coming months of the Age of Recovery, as it would come to be known in the history books. The hidden villages became far less hidden and instead blossomed into vast cities without the threat of war with other shinobi villages to put fear into their hearts. It was ironic to know that perhaps Sasuke had been right in their final battle without the masters of war. There was no war to fight. It brought him to wonder, had he been following the wrong path all this time? Who was to know? As for the man himself, Naruto Uzumaki Namik as well. No one had seen him since that fateful day. Oh, Sasuke had looked for him up and down the nations, but it seemed the blonde had just disappeared into the wind. Sometimes a tale could be heard of the tailed beasts that now roamed freely, coming to stare at something far off into the distance. And every time, smiling as if knowing something that no one else could. He heard tales of that priestess that Sakura had spoken of. In demon country fresh with child. A child with blonde hair and those strange pink eyes of hers. He heard tales of a land far to the west, where stones of something called Jell-El were being discovered and destroyed en masse by a stranger with frog-like eyes. Even at the end, Naruto had to be the hero it seemed, and Sakura made sure he knew every story, every tale of the boy he called brother. Sasuke and young Sarada enjoying these stories by their cottage hearth in the depths of the night where none but them could hear the stories of Konoha's greatest Kage, to never be it scared, Sasuke in truth. His best friend had not seen them since that day. Did he, like the man himself, blame him for extending the imprisonment of their friends with his attempt for power? Did Naruto too, like the tailed beasts, think of him as the last and ironically most successful Uchiha to try and destroy the shinobi world? Who was to tell? But he knew he felt it. The long faded moon mark on his hand burned every time he felt it. The feeling of his brother. Watching over the world in his own way, and he would feel it again. When the time came. 4th of December, 50 years after the falling. Sasuke sighed to himself as he felt his aching back creak with the strain of lifting the heavy axe that cut the firewood in front of him. The chilling wind and biting cold around him doing little to soothe his aching bones. The snowfall that peppered him did little to add to the cold of the mountains. Only serving to fight back against the Kaiten chakra he'd dwindled across his body to fight back the chill. He could smell his wife's infamous bear stew on the air from their cottage down the way. And hear his daughter and son-in-law laughing with their infant son. Naruto. A tired chuckle left the lips of the old and last Uchiha, his eyes locked on the horizon. Far to the south, he saw the temple of Strangely, one of his best friends in recent years. The monkey reminded him of his brother, with that boisterous energy and stubborn will. Goku had told him in recent months that he had felt chakra returning to the land, but it was too late for that. The old survivors had died out, and those who use chakra willingly nowadays were seen as heretical for using the power of the 9 guardian spirits of the world, a little tale he helped spread with some jinjutsu to prevent the return of the shinobi world. The sound of the train that ran beside the mountain filled the air. Its steam-powered whistle filling the silence with its shrill but comforting sound. followed not too long after by the shouts of Tain, Tain. From the toddler his daughter had brought into this world. Axe bit into wood as he finally dropped the weapon with a sigh. He himself had only grown weaker in body as the act of using chakra became outlawed. His wife, a legendary figure simply known as the Witch of the Mountain for her healing that she had been too stubborn to give up. It made him love her all the more for it. Of course, samurai came by once in a while on a heretic hunt, but a well-placed illusion always shut them up. He thought back to the last lot as he picked up the firewood in his reed-woven basket, turning to walk back down the trail to the cottage he and Sakura had called home. Mind going over how they had started to use something called guns, in recent years terrifying weapons that could outpace a jounin with the speed of their projectiles. And were as lethal as the fully empowered strike of his wife's index finger. To end life so fast, it had made him wonder if it was even worth attempting to fix this world anymore. The world needed neither him nor his family. The monks in the mountains, the witches of Iowa. His eyes passed over a well-maintained grave, softening as he gazed upon the name Kakashi Haddock. The man had gone peacefully in the end. Old age on a body that had simply been through too much in its past. He had died surrounded by 2 of his students and their family. But they knew that in his own way the third had been there with them too. On the 3rd of every month. New flowers that they had not placed would bloom anew atop the grave that glowed with the natural power of chakra. They had long since stopped asking why he never came to stay. Simply believing that he had come to hate Sasuke for what happened. They could not blame him. The sound of crunching snow underfoot came from the man as he looked out to the cottage. He and his family had built over the many decades a mansion more like, but it was home. Home to him, to his family, to his offspring and their own family. To the family of Naruto's own offspring that had fled demon country. He smiled. It was a good life he had made for them in the end. Blue Eyes watched as their scarlet and ringed brothers went into the building young. Blue Eyes watched as Sasuke hugged his wife through the windows, the ebony hair of an infant between the man's own daughter and his own son, tussled by the elder Uchiha as the boy cried out about the train he had just heard. It brought a smile to the blonde's lips. The cold of the snow did little to chill the growing warmth in the eyes of every being in that home, and for part of him, he envied it. He envied the ones who had what he wanted so badly. His eyes up at the rising moon as he thought of her his rabbit. His hinata realized far too late in the end. Naruto sighed and dropped from the trees to the snow below with not a sound. Walking up to the door of the building for the 100th, the 1000th time in his memory to knock only to stop. He had been gone far too long and unlike the Uchiha, he was not without presence. If he stayed, they would be in danger and he knew it. His head against the door and a sigh. Appa. There's someone at the door. A mature voice came from within, the cloaked figure looking to the window to see Sarada. Pointing at him. When Sasuke turned to look however, all there was 2 footprints in the snow. Rushing out he came. Firewood axe at the ready only to look at nothing. The snow was undisturbed. The air was without tension and even the plants looked a little healthier despite the winter season. He looked around, left to right, to see nothing but his home. He turned to hang the axe back up only to hear the sound of snow crunching underfoot and that voice as gravely and husky as it was 60 years ago. The wood axe. Sasuke. I could have sworn you were more of a sword guy. The cheek, the teasing nature, he turned to the voice to see him lively blonde hair that extended down to his lower back, flawless youthful skin that shone with a sun-kissed tan, blue eyes that held the wisdom of age with the life of the young. Naruto the blonde held up a finger to his lips, looking to the windows where he could see the family laughing, putting up their Christmas decor with the young boy, putting his hands in the air to catch each paper star. I see little Itachi is growing up. Last time I was here, he was just a baby. He put his hand up to catch the weak punch thrown at him. Then the other hand to grab the one who hugged him so tight that he was worried Sasuke would break his own back. I know. I'm sorry it took so long. But I can't stay, Sasuke. But his plans would go to waste as he heard her, the gasp and the shattering of a dropped plate before the woman came running out to look at him too. Her pink hair had faded to a pale gray, but she was still so beautiful. Hey Sakura. I'm Skip. After a tearful hello, a few weak punches to the skull that did little but bruise the woman's hand, and introductions to the rest of the family. Naruto found himself sitting by the fire of the hearth with his brother beside him. Sakura upstairs, just coming down after saying goodnight to the rest of the family. Beside him, Sasuke sat chuckling as he listened to the stories of the blonde. You can't seriously be telling me that you, the Naruto, was scared by a little girl. The boy just chuckled, looking to the much older man. It's the truth, team. There I am traveling through the ruins of Konoha's shinobi clan district when she jumps out at me. I didn't even know Hanabi survived, but it seemed those too young to be at war from the clans were spared in the witch hunts if they couldn't visibly use chakra. Hers and Konohamaru's granddaughter picked up his pranking streak and my god she looked just like her Igno. Little Hina the Uchiha nodded in a comfortable but somber silence, thinking back on the one whose love had never been returned till it was too late. So you trained her? The blonde shook his head, looking to the flames. No. I couldn't even if I wanted to. The world has evolved to the point where chakra coils aren't strong enough to hold chakra anymore, with a full generation of people refusing to develop their own. I showed her a few tricks to help her make do, how to throw a knife or reverse a grapple. But no. What about you? I saw those Sharingan in Sarada's eyes. Does little Itachi? The Uchiha too shook his head, sipping upon the glass of well-aged scotch in his hand. The blood is too diluted. It seemed your Uzumaki genes overpowered the Uchiha ones through that son of yours. Don't worry. We didn't tell them who you were. The two turned to Sakura, who pulled up her own chair next to her husband. God, she looked old. So what brings you here? And how come you aren't an old crone like me and Sasuke-kun? Ever the inquisitive, Sakura's green eyes gleamed with a youthful playfulness. What? No, where were you? Or why did it take you so long? The woman waved him off, smiling as she did. Well, the reason I'm not as unmatured as you two is actually quite simple. I achieved what Orochimaru couldn't. While Sakura looked confused, Sasuke's eyes widened as he shot forward only to stop at the crack in his spine. It took all the blonde head not to laugh uproariously at the sight of the great last Uchiha being soothed back into his chair while complaining about his back. But he did not ignore the glare. No team, I'm not stealing bodies. No Uzumaki before me had ever achieved sage mode to the level I have. Without Kurama, all I've had in these past years is nature. Gamakichi and Bunta even gave me a home on Mount Mayaboku, and I have spent so long immersed in her touch. Both husband and wife stared, one with wide eyes and one with a tease. Her. My for the first time in their lives, it was Naruto who swatted at Sakura, landing a precise two-finger clip to the head as he chuckled. The whine of the harmless yet still stinging woman led the chuckle to become a laugh. Not like that Iro Sakura, her Gaia the earth. Both watched as the boy entered such a serene state with a smile of true relaxation on his lips. The warmth of a summer day. A refreshing hug of cold water from the mountain spring. The grass underfoot. The blessing of nature. I have been one with her for so long now that my chakra is all but entwined with that of the world. I am in my own way, producing as much nature chakra as I absorb, constantly revitalizing and bringing new life to my Uzumaki cells. To put it simply, I stopped aging. Soon my body began to change and, well, unlike Sasuke, I didn't need the cells of another to grow my arm back. Mine just did. The woman nodded, staring at the medical impossibility. Sasuke, however, watched on with a different emotion. He realized it. Why Naruto stayed away. He smiled, a somber smile that the blonde shared. You didn't want to watch us die. Sakura turned to him with wide eyes, looking to Naruto as realization dawned on her too. The boy nodded. Not only that. I'm constantly letting off chakra and the new generation would have found me and you. You're in danger if I stay here, and if I'm gone I won't have to see the last of my friends die. I'll tell you now, you need to be as twisted as the snake Sannin to survive immortality, because it isn't living forever, it's watching everything else die. The two nodded, now looking upon Naruto with a look of respect and pain. The night from there passed rather peacefully. Naruto looking over the two as he spoke of Kaguya's relatives that he had fought on the moon of all places. Urashiki, Mamashiki, Kinshiki, Asiki, all fought to the death in week, year-long battles. It took the two a while to accept that while they had lived peacefully, Naruto had been defending them and their entire planet with a stranger, Toneri. Utu had passed to a rare sickness with his family after Naruto had let the man go a year prior, thanks to sensing the man's deteriorating health. Their conversations went on for the night and beyond it. All the while Naruto's eyes flicked to them, both sadness clear within it. Ants. When the moon was high in the sky and Sakura lay tiredly on her husband's side. The two men just stared into the flames. A wasted glass of scotch, ice now melted into it fully, lay in the Uchiha's hand, his smile somber, soft and small. His wife spoke next. How much longer? Naruto just smiled and looked at the woman, then looked back to the fire. I see. How long have you known? The blonde shrugged, looking up at the ceiling, now unable to stop the tears going down his cheeks as Sasuke spoke next. We lived a good life, Naruto. Now how much longer do we have? But the boy could not speak. He gripped a chair before sighing. You have tonight, it's why I broke my rule. I couldn't not say goodbye. It took a few seconds for Sasuke to realize it. But his arm felt numb. Here he was, near on 70 and the snake's curse mark. The blonde nodded and then looked at Sakura. My 1000 healing mark again, he nodded. All three of them had used and abused powers in the past that dwindled a person's life force. But it oddly felt okay. The three of them there alone, by a fire. I want you two to know, when the time comes I'm going to leave. I've been working on some of my father's notes, and when the time comes, I'm going to a new world. A new timeline. There's nothing more for me here, and I love you both. I love you both so much, and I want you both to know that I do not regret a moment of knowing either of you. Team 7, Team Kakashi, you both have been my greatest treasures in this life. My brother, my sister, he looked. Both were staring at him, even with tears pouring down his cheeks. A cold hand lay upon him, wiping the tears away as Sakura weakly leant over and placed such a gentle kiss upon his cheek. Sasuke too embraced the man with his good arm. The three held each other, two at peace and one silently crying. "I don't regret a moment either, Naruto. I'm just sorry I was such a bitch to you when we were younger. Thank you for giving me the joy and the pleasure of knowing the man I could have called my brilliant little brother that I love so much." Sakura's words only made the tears come harder. "Oh, don't cry. Crying is for regrets and I'm the only one who should have those. You did so much for me, where others would have given up so long ago. You saved me time and time again and showed me what it was like to have a family again. I do not regret a moment I shared with you, Sakura, my children, anyone. Because you gave me the chances to have those moments. Now come on. Dry those tears. Let us raise a glass to the end of an era and the memories of a lifetime." The blonde nodded, watching as the two tired elderly figures before him grabbed their glasses. The ruined one being poured away and filled them as well as his own. They raised their glasses high. Sakura's youthful glint clear in emerald shine as she smiled. "To the memories of those we have loved and cherished." Sasuke raised his next, his own smile clear despite his shaking grip. "To the ones we have lost and the ones who we have saved." Next, Naruto, his eyes heavy but smile clear even with its pain tone. His own glass rising, a clink filling the air. "And to the tales they'll tell of the ones who lived life to the fullest." To Team 7. To Team 7. To Team 7. The three turned their glasses back and drank, unable to hold back their own tears as they watched Naruto's drip freely, and so they drank. They drank and laughed and then Sakura fell asleep. In the arms of the man she loved. Both men felt her flame go out as her breathing stopped at just a small "good night" on her lips, but neither cried. No. They would not sully this moment of their final joy. Sasuke too felt the sleep coming for him, but he did not fear. He simply laid a final kiss on the lips of his wife and a thought to his daughter, his grandchild, his son-in-law. And his brother, who looked on as if to burn the memory into his mind. The Uchiha smiled. "Good night, Naruto. Good night, Sasuke. Sweet dreams." And so Sasuke Uchiha slept. Eyes closed to the world and Naruto wept. Staring so intently at the sight before him. When morning came, all that would be found would be the bodies of two people in love, at peace and harmony. In each other's arms. Read the disclaimer. Stepping out of the whirling blue gateway of energy and cosmic force that guided him to this point, Naruto's eyes opened from their scrunched up state and he let the air in his lungs free into the world that he found himself in. It was almost iconic really how he seemingly stepped out of one world beset on all sides by snow and trees without leaves. Into one beset on all sides by flourishing nature and the warmth of the summer glow above him. He smiled, a somber smile for what he had left behind, and shed the cloak that hid his form for his stay at the Uchiha Manor. To match the modern times he had left behind. The blonde had updated his clothes to match the looks of others so as not to stick out. Gone was the jumpsuit of orange, black and the red sage's coat that he often wore to mark his title as a senin. In their place was now a simpler look. As with all clothing he wore, the orange was prevalent and clear with the bright orange sleeveless haori that he wore with its tails currently down around his waist, hair long and flowing down its form. But that was where the similarities stopped. Green baggy trousers with a red sash belt, Jetta sandals, and his torso on full display, except for bandaged wrappings around his faded seal, led to a look almost too similar to his master and mentor. He often wondered if the old toad approved of his look. Then he reached to his bag, pulling out the fitted metal and bamboo-plated gauntlets that helped protect his forearms and hands. One of them wrapping around a black orb that lay at his side, his last Truthseeker orb, a black shakagem forming from it with the last of the chakra it held. He let the wooden staff he used in its place return to the soil, planting it as a marker for the gateway he had used to enter this world, and he inhaled. The air here was fresh. His lungs screamed in elation at the freshness of it, the smell of untainted soil, grass fresh and uncut, trees in their fullest of bloom. The breath of the sage took in all it could until his lungs were bound to pop. Before letting out a deep exhale, the grass grew a little greener in its wake, and out his hand went to catch a falling apple with a smile on his lips before he bit into it, the fresh juice of the fruit dripping down his chin as he took in the bounty of nature. He began with a single step. Followed by another as the crunching of him consuming the fruit filled the air of the forest. Making sure to toss the core into a hole left by his staff, returning the energies of the fruit back to the soil. Naruto continued on through trees that felt so unfamiliar to him. The energy of this world, so unfamiliar to him as he felt it so clearly within him. It hummed with his own and greeted it much like an old friend, the hum, the bliss of a life force so pure flowing through him, bringing a new life to his muscles and bones that, well as young as his looks, had felt so heavy with age in the recent years. He watched as a young deer bounded across the path ahead of him. Looking to him in its confusion. Even as he approached, it did not run but turned to him as well, it nuzzled against his hand as he brushed its soft and smooth fur, his smile clear as he walked the path between trees and roots alike. Here he was, near on 70 years old in his own way, and yet he felt as young and full of life as he did on that fateful day he and his master returned to his home village. The air so unfamiliar and fresh, the shine of light through canopies and the smell of dry dust kicked up underfoot. All so nostalgic to him. Here, he would not be Naruto the Jinchuriki. Naruto the Namikaze, the hero, the child of prophecy, he would be as he always was and always was meant to be. Naruto. The sage. He continued his walk in a world unknown. Unprepared for threat simply due to not wanting this world to see him as one in kind. Peace never did last long, however. His musing was shattered as he heard it. A scream. The birds flew up into the skies, startled by the sound as the deer he had left behind too began to bound away. Blue eyes hardened as flecks of green overtook them and off he went, bounding from soil to the tree branches and then to the next. Soaring over the ground below as he leapt from tree to tree. The scream did not originate again, but the feeling of oppressive hate coming from this direction alone was reason enough for him to pose worry. He let a rush of the natural energies filing his body push him up and above the treeline, only to spot something the leaves below hid. Something that shocked him to his core. Deep in the distance stood, if he had to liken it to anything, it would have been the castle that had been his prison for a short period of time. Only instead of grey stone on all sides, surrounded by the tides of a deathly sea. This was white. White and blue, metal and stone in kind, with strange flying objects coming in and out of its raised platforms. He barely had time to register the approach of the trees below before he fell, twigs stinging his skin as he fell only to snap against him as he kicked off another branch and let it fly behind him, still heading in the same direction of the scream he had heard before. When he arrived before the mouth of a cave, he was shocked to see large blade-like marks in the ground following two sets of human footprints. Any attempt to follow them was halted, however, as he heard something large in the cave. Stepping out of it was by far the ugliest bear he had ever seen in his life. But what scared him was not the bone white plating or black fur, nor the ashen smoke rising off of it was the putrid, disgusting nature chakra that flowed from it. Hate, fear, anger, all of it staining the air around this creature. An affront to him and his own energies. Did the boy pity it? Did he fear it? He did not know. When it lunged for him, he did what he did best. It was stupidly easy, really. One smack of his staff and the thing's skull cracked in two. As it dispersed, however, he felt the energy of the beast flow back into the soil, and that taint he had come to be used to in nature chakra returned the taint of human negativity and blood in the soil. He narrowed his eyes and exhaled, forcibly injecting his own energy into the soil and enjoying how rotting grass and wilting plant life returned back to their beautiful and living state. However, it seemed that he would not be as lucky as to have this creature be alone, turning to hear more growls as more of the beasts exited the cave. He narrowed his eyes, physically forcing himself not to gag at the feeling of hate and pain these creatures let off. He struck, each time they lunged he would defend himself, but each time the energy they released made him feel all the sicker for it. It was not weakening him per se, but he felt it. These damned creatures are full of raw negativity. Kurama, you would have a field day with these things. Each time one was dispatched, another two took its place, his monk staff blurring through the air as he broke ribs and smashed skulls with it. Eventually he had enough, closing his eyes as he took his endless reserves and extended his palm to the creatures. If they were made of negative energy, then all he had to do was purify it. The pained howls of the beasts nearly made his pause. But he did not stop. Pulses of green shot down his arm to his palm as he extended his presence into the soil around him, Senin chakra flooding the negative energies and smothering them with his own. He waited. And when the negative energy waned, he relaxed only to be snapped back to attention by the sound of something walking. Before him those same creatures stood. Only instead of blackened fur, red markings and that bone-white plating. These creatures had fur that resembled moss. Plating similar to bark and deep wizened green markings instead. They looked to him, much like a hound would to its owner, and as he let the hand go, they approached. Okay, so that happened alright. If you're calmer now, I'm going to go find whatever made that scream. You stay here, and he took off, leaving the command open-ended, simply because he had no idea what he had just done. Hands. The old wizard watched with interested eyes. The proximity alert on his forest had shown him a screen with a stranger's face, surrounded by Grimm on all sides. He had watched as the man dispatched them and then did something unfamiliar to him. Salem's pets had been changed, the energies within them warped by that much like his own and yet so much like hers too. If he was the light and she was the dark, this energy could only be called the center. The gray, the combination or rather the absence of both extremes. He took his mug to his lips, sipping the scalding coffee within and smiled. A new player had entered the game. Something the matter, headmaster? Oh? No, nothing of the sort, Glinda. Just looking forward to seeing the potential of some of the beings here in the forest. He ignored the look he got at that word, being after all. No human had ever managed to tame a Grimm before. Hands. His thoughts scattered on what had happened mere minutes before. Naruto's eyes narrowed in contemplation as to what he had just experienced. How the hell can you weaponize negative energy like that? And how the hell did I manage to do that? That was supposed to destroy them. The nature energy coming off of those things was palpable, like I was back on Mount Myaboku with the toads. This new world is going to have more trouble than I wanted to face at this rate. The more he journeyed, the more he felt it. That negative energy was everywhere. The world was so pure because everything that wasn't was walking, flying or even swimming outside of it. Birds the size of sparrows. He was sure that was a raven the size of a building overhead, and these bear-like creatures were everywhere. He held some form of pity for the bodies he spotted along the way, children. Teenagers in armor and modern clothing. The sound of a gunshot rang out and he turned, only to watch with minor horror as a young boy no older than he himself appeared to be, was struck across the chest by the claws of a bear. Said bear, now wisping on the ground from the gunshot. He was about to drop down and assist when he heard something overhead. One of those large metallic shapes was descending rapidly, and he did not want to be here when it did. Hiding in the trees to observe as it opened up and jumping out of it were people. A port-bellied man and a man with green hair who talked and sped around much like Rock Lee, the fat one talking in an unfamiliar language. The reply was too fast to be understood even if it wasn't gibberish, the blonde watching as the skinnier man hoisted the now revealed to be alive bodies into the object one by one, Naruto wasting no time to attach himself to its underside as it began to lift off, leaping from tree branch to its underside. He heard sounds of surprise. He hadn't exactly been quiet, but with the perfect blind spot of this vehicle, he was free to sit on its exterior and examine the ones below. He watched with odd fascination as these teens were in their own little fights. Two spots, red and white, were clinging from the raven. Another red and one blonde were running from a giant scorpion. He frowned as he watched that. Blonde and black were by a set of ruins, something pink was being followed by something green. His eyes went to the sudden plummet of red one. Thankfully he saw blonde too, ready to catch them. But he could not help but wonder of why his eyes widened. He was being pulled away from the sight by the feeling of something pressed against his back metal. He slowly turned to see the pot-bellied man, pointing a gun at him. At least he thought it was a gun. The axe blade said otherwise. The man spoke to him, but he just stared. The man spoke again, louder, but he did not understand. Bullets didn't really worry him, what with the sage chakra making his skin like well-forged chakra reinforced steel. But the essence inside the weapon, what the fuck? Does everything in this world have sage chakra now? He turned on a dime to hear the scream, and even though he could not understand it, he was sure he heard the other man curse in his language. White was falling. Blonde was getting ready to jump, but White was falling too fast from too high up. He felt the vehicle lurch forward, but at this speed they wouldn't make it. Blonde one was getting ready to jump off a tree, he wouldn't make it. Naruto's eyes narrowed and he stood up on the underside of the vehicle before he turned to the man whose weapon was still cocked at him. With a two-fingered salute, he smirked and kicked off. Those in the vehicle held on for dear life as they were sent a solid meter backwards against their jet engines, the pot-bellied man watching with eyebrows raised as the boy he had been aiming at blurred through the air, fragments of metal coming off the cracked bullhead exterior. Hands. Weiss didn't want to die. She didn't want to die here, not in this god-forsaken forest, following the whims of an absolute dolt. She heard the idiot shout out to jump, but she couldn't do that. At this height, they'd both die. But any attempts to announce that as such had been reduced to nothing as she watched Ruby jump from the Nevermore and plummet to the ground. She screamed out for her partner, who she had now written off as dead, until she heard the other sister catch them from below. She watched in awe, but that quickly turned to anger with betrayal tinged underneath. Scared tears flowing from her eyes due to the wind pressure. How could you leave me? The little twit had the audacity to say she said to jump. Oh, she'd jump and maybe land on her fat head. Maybe crush that scythe she loved so much. The feeling of something snapping gave way to panic as she felt the feather she had such a grip on begin to come loose. No, stay. Stay. I demand you stay. Her hopes were reduced to ashes as the feather came loose and she began to fall. Her mind went back to her memories in life. Of Whiteley, of winter, of mother and father. Of how this must have been how Alex felt on her fall into the ever after. Spiraling as she watched her hair flutter on the wind towards the rapidly distancing sky. She dared to look back, looking at the approaching ground, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly afraid. Even with aura, her body would not take that fall without something to catch her. The wind pressure would knock her weapon from her hands if she tried to summon any glyphs. She saw John getting ready to catch her, only for his foot to slip at the worst moment, bringing his climb up the tree to a halt. She was going to die here. Crack. Her eyes widened as a large flower grew out of the ground. Much larger than any tree, sending her partner and the others below sprawling across the ground with the dust it kicked up. Her eyes then catching a fleck of green in the distance. It was coming closer. It was coming much closer, he was heading right for her. Crystal eyes locked with brilliant green as two strong arms wrapped around her and plucked her out of her descent as if catching a feather. As the two fell together, she felt him wrap his arms around her waist and turn them so his back hit the newly grown megaflora first, kicking up a cloud of pollen that irritated her nose and covered them both. The loud creak of the flower falling, stem hitting the soil like a newly cut tree, filled the air along with her partner's concerned cry of Weiss. But she felt no pain. She panted, her nails like claws digging into the arms of the one who had caught her. Eyes wide and afraid. She heard words but did not understand them, turning slowly to see the one who had caught H. Rusted Knight. He bore so many similarities, the storybook hero come to life with her in his lap. He spoke again, lifting her up off of him and away from the fallen flower that was dissolving into some kind of green energy. What kind of semblance was that? When he spoke the third time, mildly drowned out by the others running over to her, she raised an eyebrow. I'm sorry but I don't understand what you're saying. Seems he too did not understand, but the black-haired one Blake, if she remembered correctly, narrowed her eyes. He said, "Are you alright there, Snowy?" Any respect she had dissolved at the nickname, eyes deadpan glaring as she huffed and turned away. Naruto, for his view of things, was confused as to what the black-haired one had said to make Snowy so mad. His musings however would be cut short as the same raven came around for what he assumed was its own attack. And being so occupied with his thoughts, he was not reactive enough to stop Red from dashing off to attack. Blonde 1 and 2 shouted her name, and when the feathers impaled her cloak, he too got ready to intervene before the large scorpion could strike. Only for Snowy to strike first. Aku, his eyes widened at the ice that stunk of sage chakra. Come to think of it, they all did. Each and every single one of them. Seriously, did he enter a realm of sages or something? His frantic thoughts were cut off as they began to run off, leaving him behind to follow what occurred next filled his heart with nostalgia. He had been ready to jump in at any time really and had on multiple occasions been about to before things righted themselves. The sage watched as the 8 of them formed 2 teams, blonde, red, green and pink versus the scorpion and red, blonde, white and black against the bird. Team 1 was beyond a doubt the weaker of the two. But the strategy they held was one that was greatly planned out by Blonde if Naruto was correct in his assumption. Disable, disarm, set up and strike it down. Then use the force of the attack to fling them off onto the soil next to him. But Team 2 Naruto couldn't help but grin. An elder he may be at heart, but he never lost the youthful side of him that let him see things for what they were. And what they were was awesome. The way Black used her Kasuri to fling herself from the bird to the towers, the crumbling bridge and back. How Yellow recklessly and bravely flung herself into battle and stunned the beast with blows that he could have sworn were filled with some form of Kaiten Senin chakra. But then his attention went to her. Red. How she moved, the swift speed. The slashes, the way she planned this out and used White Snowy's natural was that fucking Fuinjutsu. It took a while to blink the surprise out of his eyes, ignoring how Team 1 had finally taken notice of him. But he did not care. He watched as Red ran up a sage-damned wall with the help of the Fuin from Snowy. And decapitated the beast with ease, her battle cry filling the air and rose petals of all things left in her wake. He couldn't help but laugh. Not the mocking kind, but that kind you always let out when something had completely surprised you. As Team 1 got up and surrounded each other, checking over their wounds and Team 2 did the same. Naruto just smiled. He sensed negative energy behind him, his head looking back to see the large group of bears heading toward Ursa heading towards him if the red one with the shield was to be believed. Hinata Himington stomped his heel into the ground, impaling each of them on tree roots that shot out of the soil. He heard everyone, even Team 2 gasp from the other end of the bridge at what he had just done. As he looked back to the 8 of them. His head tilted, he just smiled at the looks he was getting. And he was damn sure that red one just screamed something about him being cool. Damn right he was cool. Damn right he was cool. Cool enough to be clapped in irons with guns filled with sage chakra pointed at him the moment he set foot near this metal monstrosity that had come to pick up Teams 1 and 2. He almost had to laugh at the absurdity of it. One of them had tried to take his staff from him only for that truth-seeking orb to dissolve and reattach itself to his waist. They shouted at him, he grinned and shouted back. One of them went to punch him across the face and broke their hand in the effort. Seems mortals in this world were more fragile than his own, although the glowing and shattered light around them did make him wonder what was going on. Ah well. He watched as Team 2 specifically had protested this treatment, but these guards. Police. Shitty Anbu samurai wannabes. He did see swords on them. Screw it, pawns. Call them pawns. These pawns had seen fit to threaten them with iron too. Oh, Yellow was not happy, but White was as cold as her name would suggest, and he did wonder why, probably because I saved her life. Hero worship does a thing like that. Currently he was sitting on a surprisingly comfy chair with 1, 2, 3, 4 no 3, that last one was a pistol and he didn't count those. firearms pointed at him. They looked just as deadly as his worlds, if not more so. He watched as one of them sat down in front of him with a glowing piece of glass in her hands and began wiping her finger on it, making the glows and squiggles move. Okay, either that's some really cool looking jutsu or people forgot how to use paper in this world. The more she asked questions, the more he began to get irritated however, relying on sage chakra to keep himself mellowed out enough to reply in nonsense answers. If anyone was able to discern both languages, they would have heard the conversation go as such. Name and date of birth. So it all started when a fox was shoved into my belly. Brady doesn't understand international common all because a spiral-faced man got cucked by my sensei. Can someone get me a translator or something? My childhood was nothing to complain about, constant death can make things exciting. Like the ramen broth of life. It took all he had to not break down into little giggles and chuckles as the masked female screamed out what he could only assume to be obscenities before walking back and pulling up her magic glass, using it like a phone. He blinked at the words being spoken, almost as if they were hushed and whispered for a reason of secrecy. Whoa, only what kind of secrecy was someone going to find in this cramped space? His gaze went out the window where he could see the other ships with the girlies and the strugglers on them, going down towards a platform where he just went up. And up. And up. Eventually he had enough and with a twitch, both cuffs snapped from each other. The sounds of shouting and the cocking of their weapons came next, but he followed it simply by holding his hands up and flashing that foxy smile of his. He then casually, despite their shouting, pinched the cuffs around his hands and took great pleasure in slowly peeling the metal back off of him before letting them fall to the ground and then sat back against the wall. Hands in his lap. They kept shouting at him, they slapped another pair on him, and he did exactly the same with less elegance this time around. Simply flexing his chakra like a field around him to make the cuffs bed under the pressure. At this point, one of them had taken their helmet off completely to stare at him in awe. The shouting over the scroll got quiet when he heard the woman whispering now. Boy blondie. He shot upright to hear someone speaking his language, looking over to the woman in question with a bright grin. So the headmaster was right, you do understand Menagerie's native tongue. I thought that died out years ago. He had absolutely no idea what the hell Menagerie was, but he did not like the name. Too much, although with a lifetime of Konohagakure under his tongue, yeah, he could appreciate a city name under 4 syllables or less. He watched as she walked over and sat back down again, the lurching feeling of the metallic monstrosity he was in only growing the higher it got. Name and date of birth. The blonde just smiled. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, 10th of October. The woman obviously waited for him to continue, his eyes blinking at in confusion before ahhing. She wanted the year, something people of his world didn't do until the Fourth War had ended, claiming it was BC and AD. Or before Cataclysm and after development. We don't count the years where I come from, just the date. You never ended up living long enough for the years to matter in the long run. Obviously, the wrong thing to say as her eyes widened and looked at him with a look akin to pity. Him. He was 3 times her goddamn age. But any further questioning was cut off as the metal case hit something. The jostle causing him to bite the inside of his own cheek. Okay, he did not like that. A little application of chakra through the tongue and it was healed up fine. Leading him to stand up and follow the shouty men with the big guns. It was fun pretending like he couldn't fold these people in half. When the doors opened however, he was shocked to feel it. Feel him. Standing at the end of a walkway leading into a large room surrounded on all sides by glass windows, a man that reminded him almost too much like a combination between his father and Kakashi was standing with coffee in hand and a cane at the other. He conjured up his own staff despite the shouts to they were telling him to disarm. He looked to the one who spoke his language and smiled, pointing at the staff. This is just for looks, you don't need to worry. A total and utter complete lie, but hey, it made her call them off slightly. He felt the barrel of a gun jutted into his spine 2 strikes now and began walking with the command to do so. He was somewhat happy to see the old man younger than old. Man, did not approve of this. With a wave of his hand, he uttered something that made the Wanabanbu back off and step back. The man opening up the door to the room behind him with a smile. Naruto was it? Why don't you come inside and you can explain why you crashed a yearly test to enter my academy? Ah. That would explain the hostility. Ans. Ozpin, as the man's name turned out to be, was a riot. The man seemed to delight in subtly pissing off his assistant that reminded him far too much of Tsunade in her own way, even going as far as to ask her to leave him alone with the possible threat to go get said threat a bowl of ramen when the craving was mentioned. The man had this kinder expression but an aura of danger around him at all times. It reminded him far too much of the third. Danzo and oddly even a little of himself in some way or form. So can you please answer my question, Naruto? Why did you intrude on my test and where did you come from? The blonde held up a finger as he used one hand to drink what was left of the ramen broth from the bowl itself, placing it down on the desk with a polite little clink only for Glinda, as he now knew her, to pick up the bowl and walk out with a huff. "Well, you see, Ozpin. I didn't actually mean to. I was walking through the forest when I heard this scream. I went to check it out and got attacked by some big owlbears." The narrowed eyes of the man in front of him were more than enough to make him realize he made a mistake. "Are you going to tell me the true story now, Mr. Uzumaki?" The blonde sighed and leaned back in the chair. He had already ascertained that he could snap this man like a twig if he posed a threat, but he simply didn't want to. A lifetime of war and fighting in one land did little to encourage another lifetime of it in another world. "Alright. I'm a 70-year-old ageless sage from another world who used dimensional travel to escape the boundaries of my world when I had to watch my last friends die. Using an unknown technique, I opened a gateway to one of the many alternative dimensions available to me, lost the scroll for it, and now I find myself here. Where sage energies is in fucking everything, and I simply just want to live. Because I do not have any other option available to me other than dying at the hands of introduced death." He expected the man in white coats at any moment now, but the look being given to him by the man in front of him was most certainly not one of someone who thought he was crazy. It was one of understanding. The man just flipped a switch, he supposed it was under the man's desk by the sound of it, and he heard the door behind him lock. Then the man leant back and smiled. "Well. That's most certainly not the least exciting story I've heard. Nor is it the most believable. But you don't have the pose and tells of a liar, Mr. Uzumaki." He wanted to say something about feeling old, but he was old, it kind of came with the territory. "However, I'm afraid that what you have just told me only poses more questions than it does answers for now. Let me tell you a little about this world." The blonde figured that, after all, he did just drop the dimensional travel bomb. He did not expect Ozpin to lean forward and interlace his hands on his desk, much like his old cage did at times, however, smiling with a predatory glint to his eye as he did. He did not like that, not at all. Then he remembered. Test. 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 Oh shit, he was back in school. At 70. For the next few hours. Ozpin proceeded to drill every fact, factoid and factina into his skull, and the only thing that kept him from gaining a wall out of place to escape was that the man had been polite to him up until now. And, despite what his many tutors might say, he wasn't opposed to gathering information. And boy, was there information to gather. Grimm, Veil, Vacuo, Dust, Hunters, Huntresses, Atlas, more dust, or he was sure the old man was leaving out some parts of the story, but there would be times to ask those questions. When the old man came to a stop, Naruto had steam rising from his ears from information overload from what he could figure out. This world had similarities and differences to his own. Not too similar, not too different. Yet entirely so at the same time. His eyes went to a clock that had just started to go off, the headmaster sipping his coffee with a smile. "Seems our time is up, Mr. Uzumaki. It is a shame because I can tell you have questions of your own, as many as I have about you. I could assist you in learning about this world if you wish, but you will have to tell me more about your own." There was no real threat in doing that, he had nothing back home to protect, and no one here would benefit from his secrets, so he nodded. Ozpin just smiled, standing up and walking around to face him. "Now if you wish to stay here at Beacon. I need to ask if you will be attending or teaching." Neither sounded appealing. He had spent enough of his life learning. And his journey around the world had already shown him the horrors of students. But in the end he chose the one which would allow him the most freedom. "Alright, welcome to the team, Sensei Uzumaki." Oh sage, he was going to regret this, wasn't he? Ans. Scratch that, he was already regretting it. With enough shadow clones in the office of his new employer, reading dictionaries on both Menagerie and International Common. The boy was already thankfully proficient enough in his language skills to understand the speech made by the man in question. He had to wonder if Kakashi had been reincarnated into this world, watching the vague words confuse and befuddle where others only grew excited. He snickered a little at the group who picked up something called Black Bishop, only one of them had any real armor, and he looked so far up his own ass that he could smell what he had for dinner 2 weeks ago. Dawn, Purah, Nor and Ren, as he learnt their names were next. He did raise an eyebrow at the white rook pieces, they were fucking gold, but he could immediately tell that one of them did not belong. The nervous look, the shaking knees. This John was shaking in his boots. Hopefully his team leader will help knock him out of that team was in trouble. What was Ozpin thinking? Making someone like that the leader. He already started making plans to slip the poor lad some reading material on strategic input and team leading exercises. Maybe some workout materials too if it just took a friendly push to knock him flat on his ass. The fact he reminded Naruto of himself around Sakura, Sasuke and Kakashi was don't focus on it Naruto, they wouldn't want you to suffer for them. Just let it go. He let himself escape into the grasp of nature energies once more, ignoring how some more animalistic, faunus, students and teachers alike, began looking at his hiding spot. Next was Ruby. Yang. Blake. Weiss. Okay, they picked up their pieces too. It seemed okay. Ozpin, which will it be? Red or white? Red had the heart for teamwork and the strategic planning, White was obviously hopeful and much more trained. And with one statement he saw one girl's hopes crumble into offense and another one's drown in worry. That group would need help, but he was glad to see the yellow one, which now he recognized to be the big sister. Encourage Red. But then when he dismissed the group, he heard it. He turned from his hiding spot to see Ozpin looking right at him. And to top the beginning of this year off with new starts and newer beginnings, I would like to introduce our newest member of faculty on academy grounds. Mr. Uzumaki, if you would please. Mumblings and mutterings filled the room as the screen showing the names began to reel itself up, Naruto sighing as he applied a little bit of chakra to his feet and dropped onto the stage without making a sound. He was dressed in his full gear. Monk's staff at his side, leading to gasps and whispers as to his appearance from the crowd. He remembered what Ozpin had told him, just let the man talk, thank you. Now, I understand you all must be wondering how someone so young is teaching here at Beacon Academy. Well, Mr. Uzumaki has offered his services as a trained and experienced war veteran from the wildlands between the kingdoms. Okay. That was not part of the goddamn plan. In the pursuit of teaching the next generation how to survive. His education will not be counted amongst the curriculum that you will find in your schedules, but… Naruto cleared his throat, smiling as he stepped forward, blatantly interrupting the headmaster. The man was already speaking far too much, but the smirk on the man made Naruto assume he had been waiting for him to interrupt. But… I will however keep an open door to any and all of the new generation who wish to come see me for assistance or guidance. This was the plan. He would learn more about the world, and in kind he will teach the younger students about the real world of militarized law enforcement. A goddamn guidance counselor of all things. It was perfect, with his ability to sense negative emotions and wise and sagely ways. He could almost hear Kurama calling bullshit on that. Some of you may wonder why this is important enough to end your initiation with. Well. It's simple. Some of you in this room will not survive contact with the enemy when you leave these grounds. I have seen it. Women who join up because of infatuation with a boy. Arrogance and bloodlines and names, fools with dreams who seek only to glorify their names, souls darkened by trauma and pain, led astray by hunger for power. All pure hearts at one point, lead dead by misdirection of the same heart. He could see that his words had struck many in the crowd, pained expressions on some with angered or scared on others. But his eyes went to some who looked at him with sympathy. That's right, he only looked a little older than they did at this point. Every single one of you. The shout filled the hall, making some jump back in surprise as his stern expression became a mighty smirk. Are as seeds to soil. If any of you wish to grow, you must be nurtured and cared for. That is the role of the other teachers. Whereas I shall help you trim the weeds and the roots that wish to strangle your potential. I welcome all with open arms, an open door and an open ear. I simply ask that you have the strength in yourself to admit your need for help when you need it. You are soldiers in training. Warriors. You must bear the heart of one, and I shall see to it that your hearts shine bright in the light of Beacon. A cheesy pun. Perhaps, but the looks of awe and inspiration shining upon him from the crowd lit a light inside his heart. Was this how Jiraiya felt with him? The cheer of a student from the back of the room brought attention to him, a black silhouette slowly sitting down as awkwardness filled the air. See, he got it. The laughter that followed solidified it as his laughter joined the room's, and even Ozpin seemed to smile a little deeper at what he saw. Perhaps being a teacher wouldn't be so bad. Aion. Sage, when was the last time he slept like that? Blonde hair splayed out across the bed, blue eyes filled with a fatigue, but so rested, and a soft smile after so many years, so many decades of living on the run from witch hunters and anti-shinobi forces. When was the last time he felt so safe lying in bed? When was the last time he had allowed himself the time and space to relax so much? All around his bed he could see sake bottles, empty thankfully, with his sage chakra already working to purge his hangover from his body. Not enough to sit up just yet, however. His eyes went to a nearby clock, smiling as he noticed it was only 8 in the morning. Alright, lazy bones, time to get up. Ignoring the headache, he sat up and looked over to where the bottles were mainly gathered. For the first time since their passing, Naruto had allowed himself the privilege of grieving his last 2 friends. Sitting on his desk, a miniature sakura tree now sat beside a wooden carving of a one-eyed wolf and a red pinwheel made of rose petals. And so many tear marks in the wood. He walked over to the desk and sighed, leaning down to place such a gentle kiss upon each item. He then looked to the others, the portraits. Teams 8, 9, 10 and 11, were they watching him, wherever they were? Did they approve? Did she approve? His heart drawing him to her eyes, those lavender eyes. In her last days, he wished he had managed to say so much more than what he did. A familiar pain filled his chest. He leaned down and planted the softest kiss upon her portrait. Eyes heavy with loss. "You always said I was good with kids, I hope you were right Hina, I love you." The one truth he never told. Too late, always too late. He had so many years to come to terms with it. And none to explore it. He smiled and chuckled as he heard the other teams nearby begin to stir. It would be his first day on the job after all, so he began to pick up the bottles of sake he had let strewn across the room before tossing them into the garbage seal of the desk. A knock on the door led him to jolt. It wasn't a Venwit that wasn't the door. The sudden sound of hammering came from the wall next to him, eyes wide as a nail came out right next to his picture of the Ichiraku family. Without hesitation he ran out of his room and stormed over to the next, banging on the door with a fury. "Damn it Ruby, I told you that it was too loud." Weiss. He sighed and looked down, contemplating what he would and he wasn't wearing a shirt. Shit. It looked like fate would laugh at him today as the door opened up. "I'm sorry about the noise," my dolt of a teammate met blue, embarrassed smile, meeting flushed and heavily embarrassed stare. Over his shoulder, he spotted a nervous Ruby, a raised eyebrow from Blake and was yang drooling. Sir, I'm so sorry," he waved off Ruby's words, sighing to himself as he rubbed his face. First impressions were not a problem, they had already met technically. "It's fine about the noise, it's time for everyone to be up anyway. However your nail nearly destroyed one of my precious photos, use the double-sided sticky pads that you were supplied with." He thought he heard her mumble something about them never working right, followed by another apology. Blake however stood up from her bed next and. "Since when is it appropriate for a teacher to intervene in a test and walk around half naked around students? And how is it you can suddenly speak our language?" All four girls looked at him again at that, leading the blonde to deadpan at the sudden accusing look sent his way. "It became appropriate when first-year students nearly damaged my property when I had just woken up. As for the test. I was making my own way to Beacon for my new employment and saw a girl plummeting to her death. What was I supposed to do?" The quick thinking seemed to have worked as Red looked away and Yang's eyes softened along with Blake's. Weiss however she was looking at him as if he wasn't there. He placed a hand upon her shoulder and watched her jump, coming back to reality in a jolt. Huh? What? She must have been more scared than I thought. He put on the patented sage smile, as well as letting a little sage chakra out through his hand to soothe the girl with the presence of purified nature. "Try not to focus on it, a fall like that would make anyone scared. It's surviving it that you can focus on. Now, you girls should hurry up and get to class before you're late, then get back and sort out your room." It was about now that he noticed both death traps in the room. One bed stacked upon books, another hanging from ropes. His eye began to twitch. Rapidly. "Get to class. Now." The girls didn't need to be told twice, grabbing their things and rushing down the hallway away from the irritated teacher. The blonde took a solid look at what was going on before sighing to himself and walking over to his room once again, plucking up a paper scroll and walking back. He looked at Team JNPR as they looked out of their dorm to examine what the noise was, a judgmental look sent from their leader for a shirtless teacher walking into the girls' room. "They woke me up, nail through the wall, I'm fixing the death traps. Get to class, you're late." The words alone sent the team scrambling down the hallway in a familiar fashion, leading Naruto to chuckle as he closed the door and sat down. With a crack of his fingers and a roll of his neck, 2 puffs of smoke announced the conjuring of 2 clones that got to work on undoing the chaos of the beds. He would have rearranged them before noticing the utter lack of any room the girls had left with their possessions. Bunk beds it was then. But done properly. When the first bed was dealt with, the books being easier to deal with than Red's impromptu hovered. He unsealed a few chunks of wood and made a rat sign with his hand. From the wood he pressed against the bed frame, tendrils of newly sprouted fiber and bark took over, interlocking around the bed frame and lifting the top one up. It was a simple fix. With both frames now fused to feel and look like one large frame. With a natural ladder made of intertwining roots and branches now coming down near the foot of the bed. The loud crash however made him turn, noting how Clone 1 had managed to slip on a discarded shirt and lose all the weight of the bed tearing the ropes and the sheet that was acting as the cover for the first bed. "I thought boys were supposed to be the slobs." Unsure if the sheet was taken from home or not, Naruto sighed and got to work on fixing the mess that his clones had made. The bed was repeated, wood made to connect the joints with a ladder, but in order to replace the torn sheet, he let the tree keep growing. It took a little finessing, but by the time he was done the branches had formed a shell over the top of the bed, allowing for the sheet to be replaced by greenery. "I must say, I didn't know you were an interior decorator." He sighed as the presence he had been sensing for the past 10 minutes finally spoke, turning to look at the woman, Glinda, who was looking at him with a sense of he was sure it was anger, but also surprise. Less decorator and more concerned adult who doesn't want some girl to smash her face in every time she gets out of bed. She nodded but did not stop staring at him as he continued to test the structure of the bed. Climbing the ladder to ensure it would not snap before jumping down. As he went to walk out, a hand against his chest stopped him. The angry glare made him wish it didn't. Next time, Mr. Uzumaki. I would like it if you didn't walk around the students' rooms in such a state, especially around impressionable young women. Oh. His cheeks began to burn red, leading to the glare to get deeper before he sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. Not my intention, I swear. They nearly destroyed something precious of mine with a nail through the wall, and I rushed over in a state of temper. I noticed the death traps they set up to sleep in and decided to do something about it before we had a student casualty. The explanation seemed to quell the rising anger, but her stare was still quite intense. We don't approve of tattoos, Uzumaki. Cover that up when you can. Ah, the seal not really an issue, he just nodded. His scroll, the electronic one, began to buzz as he noticed Glinda's name appear upon its screen with a raised eyebrow, one she took notice of. I just sent you the student profiles so you may research them for your role here in Beacon. I don't know what the hell Ozpin thinks he's doing with this lie for you, but if you insist on playing this role, then I'd like to ensure that the students don't end up in a worse state due to misunderstanding them. It was only his experience with people like Glinda that prevented him from snapping at her. Not like Tsunade. More like Kurenai. Caring of her students to a hatefulness of anything that could harm them. Not anyone, anything. He just smiled, nodding. Thank you, Glinda, I'll be sure to perform to the best of my ability in regards to helping the students. Is there anything else that's needed? She took a moment to look at him, then the room, then back at him with a shake of her head. Nothing else, Uzumaki. Although, I do think we might need you to make more bunk beds, they certainly seem to better the room for sake of size and storage. He tried to ignore her as she smiled and walked away, groaning at the idea of having to repeat this numerous times in the dorm rooms. At least he'd have a shirt on this time. Ands. After, in his own opinion, wasting precious hours while the students were in class with clones in the effort of fixing up bunk beds and seeing way too many occurrences of students sleeping in. Naruto was glad to finally be out of the dorm house and outside where the air was fresh once more. Dressed in his battle uniform, so at his back. He was currently waiting for what Ozpin had called a residential weapons expert to come find him by the landing pads of Beacon's cliffside air dock. He looked out across the city, the kingdom below, with a slow whistle. That's a lot of people. Professor Uzumaki. Oh no, he turned slowly to spot the incoming red blur and nearly yelped as she came to a skidding stop mere inches from him. Ruby Rose stood in her uniform and red cape. That strange red weapon of hers on her back and flushed cheeks as she stared up at him. He gulped, looking at her. Are you the weapons expert I'm supposed to be waiting for? She nodded, her grin marred by the panting of having just rushed to get here. Aren't you supposed to be in class? She shook her head, smiling a little brighter in that way that even made him chuckle before he helped her stand up straight. A free period. Professor Ozpin asked if I could assist you with something to do with weapons today, and his hand stopped her from speaking as he held it up to her. Smiling as he waited for her to catch her breath. He waited and then spoke. Firstly, please call me Naruto when not in session with me. Secondly, it's not so much as assist me with something to do with weapons as it is actually helping me construct and assemble a W. You don't have a weapon. He took a moment to clear the sound from his ear as he placed a rather empty glare on the girl. The kind that wasn't angered but annoyed. He motioned for her to follow, walking back towards the school. Where I grew up, we learned that weapons are only as deadly as the body. We used our aura to augment it and make our blows hit heavier. However, it has been made apparent to me by Professor Ozpin that I am in need of a weapon and my staff isn't enough. He told me he would send a weapons expert to me. So I hope he wasn't joking by sending you. Was it harsher than intended? Maybe. But it was needed to get the girl to focus. She did seem downtrodden for a bit, something that made him wince as it made him feel like he had kicked a puppy. But she sprung back and then sped off ahead while motioning for him to follow. He did so, easily. Up until she used her semblance, following the rose petals left behind was easy enough for the sage, the energy they let off acting as a trail of aura to the girl, happily bouncing on her feet outside a door simply labeled forge. This is where we will make me a weapon, correct? She nodded, opening the door and walking in. As he followed, he was taken aback by the sheer heat coming from the room, looking around to see workbenches and a full furnace and forge in the back of the room. Tsuuo, he turned to look at her, raising an eyebrow at her slow drawn-out approach to conversing with him. What kind of weapon do you prefer to use? He blinked a few times before looking at his staff. It had been so long since he had settled on the staff that he couldn't remember using any other type of weapon. Swords, axes, hammers. Anything with a purpose to kill felt wrong in his hands. Mainly staffs. He nodded at her question, smiling as he took the tso off of his back and laid it down on the table. Yeah, blades, guns, hammers, axes. They all were made to kill. A staff was made to support and help those who need it like an old friend. He tried to ignore the light wince that came from the girl, hearing that when you wield a scythe and a compacted rifle must have been a little uncomfortable. Although I suppose the spear was formed from the staff, as was the axe or the scythe. This time he didn't ignore the little smile that came across her face and chuckled as she stroked her own weapon affectionately when she thought he wasn't looking. What I don't understand is why Professor Ozpin thinks you need a weapon when you already have that staff. He looked to her as her hand ran over the staff in question and almost jumped when her aura shone near it, leading him to laugh at her reaction. He then picked it up off the table and smiled at her. The reason why, Miss Rose, is because the staff is part of my semblance. Sage above, thank you for making this one so trusting. She cooed with awe at his words, then even more at how he shifted the staff back into an orb. Then a sword. Then a hammer. Then a mimicry of her own scythe. That's so cool. Damn right he was cool. But then he saw her eyes narrow. Shit, did he show too much? Hang on. How did you make all those plants if your semblance is that ball? Shit. Shittity shit of Shittington. That was not a question he wanted to answer right now, but it seemed that he didn't really have much of a choice if someone as youthfully naive as Ruby had seen through him. Thinking fast, he spoke fast. I have more than one semblance. The forge's flames were the only sound he heard at that, looking at her with a gaze that hid the amount of panic going on behind them. It was his first day and he had already gotten caught. Shit, he would have to run. Knock the girl out and flee, and then how? Okay, maybe not. The innocent tone in the girl's question showed she somehow believed him. Okay, gotta think, throw in some truth. My original semblance was aura manipulation. I was able to manipulate it in numerous ways, such as energy-based attacks or shaping it. I later learned how to use it to manipulate the world around me through mediation and intertwining it with the aura of plants and animals. He could feel the lie shaking in his grip as he said it. Ooh, okay. And he sticks it. So now you need a weapon for long-range capabilities. He didn't really. If anything, he thought this was a waste of time. Why use a weapon for long range when he had techniques for long range? If anything, this was just to keep to his look of a teacher from the wilds. As well as an idea from Ozpin to get close to one of the more interesting team leaders. Favoritism much? He blinked as she shoved a book in front of him and sat down on one of the desk stools, motioning for him to do the same. As he did, he began to listen to her drone on and on about different weapon types and the different types of dust, of caliber, of frame, material, all sorts. For a moment her red and black locks were replaced by 2 cocoa-colored buns and a red cape faded in favor of a Chinese shirt. Then 10, you'd either love or hate this girl for stealing your shtick. The love for weapons and the love for ninja tools was palpable between them both. Something that made him smile. You've been a bit too harsh with her, Naru. The kids here are allowed to be naive. Let them. The years of being on the run had indeed done their damage. And being in this building, so far away from the natural forests, was certainly irritating him. But he knew better. He knew he had to be better than that. So he listened. And listened well. And this is an anti-material rifle. One of the more expensive weapons to wield in the field. It's capable of punching a hole in a bullhead from up to 200 meters away. And shredding the side of one at 100 meters, still not as good as my baby though. He did not chuckle. He did not chok, he chuckled if the embarrassed blush on Ruby's face had anything to do with it. She whined as he broke out into a small bout of laughter at her embarrassment towards her gun love, pouting as he began to ruffle her hair. The two remained silent at that, one too embarrassed to speak and one now feeling a lot more comfortable in the room. Only the light turning of pages filled the air with small mutterings as to what the weapon in question could do. Admittedly, he liked the sound of a shotgun. But when range was the issue, buckshot would not satisfy. A rifle felt too large to use in comfortable combat with his staff. A machine gun didn't fit his style, and explosives felt useless when he could cause them with a flick of his wrist. An entire hour passed before he heard the bell go, wincing at Ruby's shout of being late for class. Nope. He snatched his scroll from his side and sent a message to Ozpin, smiling as he did. And done. She turned to him in a mid-dash to get to her next class. Only to blink as he patted the stool. I just got you another free period. Now come on, show me about these hand cannons you were on about. He totally didn't smile when she grinned. Nope. She totally wasn't starting to grow on him. I see before me a girl who has spent her entire life getting exactly what she wanted. Do you really believe that acting in such a manner would cause those in power to reconsider their decision? Instead of fretting over what you don't have. Savor what you do. Port's words lay heavily within the mind of the young Schnee as she focused on the what-ifs and what-could-bes of that day. Yang had made her displeasure of her attitude rather obvious when the group had received word that their leader would be busy with the counselor next door all day. And Blake, well, she had made it obvious how she felt about the girl since day one. Schnee. The word dripped like venom from her tongue. She had come here to escape the tone of her name that Atlas held, and here she was. painting it all over again with her expectations, and stubborn entitled ways. Father would have smacked her clean across the face for her behavior today, and Winter would have scolded her with her icy words. When she heard Ruby walk in, she was ready to apologize. Ask for forgiveness, anything, but the dolt had focused entirely on the new beds. If she paid attention to her scroll at all, she would have gotten the pictures of it, as well as the notice from Professor Goodwitch as to Professor Uzumaki's redesign of all the dorm rooms. Then her scroll went and buzzed. Which could only mean one thing. Father had paid someone off to get her scroll number. Or one of the professors needed her. Her heart went cold at what she saw. Miss Schnee. Your presence has been requested for a late-night emergency counseling session with Professor Uzumaki. This is not optional. Professor Goodwitch. Why him? Why him? Of all the teachers, why the one who made her shake so much? She sneakily left the room that held her team with a slow exhale. Thankfully still in uniform due to not wanting to relax until she was sure that Ruby was okay and safe. The closer she got to the door, the more her heart began to pound with worry in her ears. Port was a pompous old fool who spent his time telling stories instead of teaching. Ozpin, if her father was to be believed, was an airhead of a man who dreamt rather than taught. Uzumaki was a seasoned warrior and veteran who would not be gentle with her if she said the wrong thing. At least that was how she saw it. She shakily exhaled, noting the door was ajar. He was waiting for her. Oh, brothers above, he must have been so mad. She stopped a moment. Why was she acting like this? Decorum, Weiss, decorum. You're a Schnee, act like one. She didn't think for a moment if those were her words or her father's. She checked the scroll. She had been hesitating for 5 whole minutes. No more wasted time. She walked in and took in a sharp breath at what she saw. It has to against school policy to have such a mature and handsome teacher. It wasn't her fault that this man was the living specimen of the heroes she adored as a child, be they the rusted knight, her grandfather. All held the same feeling of power and wisdom. And it was pouring off of the man in front of her. She took a small breath to steady herself. You wanted to see me, Professor? Ah yes, Miss Schnee. Take a seat. Okay, he didn't sound too angry with her. No, this was probably just trying to figure out what exactly had happened. The dolt had probably rambled on, and we need to have a talk about the roles of a good team member. The disapproval of her was matched only by the cold and plain way the words were said. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed, and everyone knew that was much, much worse. She bowed her head and walked in, taking the time to sit down upon the chair in front of her and take a deep inhale of Rothershire Stouchinger. In his hand was her own, his face one of both worry, disappointment and understanding. His very touch calmed her down. Unaware of the sage putting out his presence into the air to do just that. When he was sure that she had calmed down enough, he let go and leaned back with a sigh. Ruby has told me everything that has happened. And Port sent me a message too. Apparently you and him had a talk around about the same time Ozpin spoke to her. Oh brothers. Oh sweet brothers, did Ozpin hear her say he made a mistake? That was absolute career death. She nodded, wanting to focus on the conversation between herself and Professor Uzumaki, rather than the one who could possibly send her home back to that man, and the one who could end her career with just a little exposure of how she had acted. She was glad to see his mood lighten a bit at that, as he sat back in his chair and crossed his hands over his lap while looking her over. Not in the way she wanted to stab most men his age for, but as if looking for something. For Naruto, he couldn't believe his luck. Or rather, his lack of it in this case. Sitting before him was the tails to Hinata's head, the yin to her yang. An heiress. The younger sister to an older one who topped her in every subject, bound to uphold the family's legacy with a younger sibling who was preferred over her. But the family power she was struggling to uphold coming from a family reputation disgraced by an older member and dragged through the mud due to actions of superiority over others. It was like someone had pushed Sasuke and Hinata together and spray painted it with snow. It took him a while to find the words, all the while he watched the Schnee squirm in her seat as nervousness grew in her heart. He knew, he could feel it. His eyes went to the table where a pinwheel span and the eyes of his could have been stared at him perhaps a little harder. He could hear them both. Ah, you two would never forgive me if I let another walk down your paths. He sat up, stood up in fact, and walked over to the desk next to his bed, where a crystal decanter sat. Weiss saw as he poured 2 glasses of a pink-toned liquid, the smell of alcohol on the air from its opening. She blinked as one was placed in front of her. Sir, I'm not, he shushed her, taking a small sip of his own drink. Old enough to fight Grimm, old enough to die in battle, old enough to take a drink besides, it's weak. Cherry blossom infused rice wine, you'd need at least 6 of them to get sloshed. I'm sure someone who's used to a glass of wine with dinner is more than used to something like that. She ducked her head with a light blush at being so easily called out, taking the glass and sipping it. It burnt. It burnt in that good sweet way that mother's wine always did. Of alcohol second, flavor first. Those who betray the rules or follow them without discipline are scum. His voice pierced the air and for one moment she thought that he was talking about her. In that moment, she felt her heart drop into her stomach before thinking she hadn't broken any rules. She had been Ruby. He was talking about Ruby. Her eyes narrowed and unbeknownst to her, he took great joy in that. That spark. That disobedient little flame, they just get in the way of what needs to be done. They get in the way of due process, of the way things need to be. They mess up and time and money need to be wasted to bring them back up to speed, while those in better positions can be placed there instead. Why bother at all, why not? Slap. She held her stinging hand. Looking at him in a sense of disgust as he hadn't even turned his head. He looked at her though, as if wanting an explanation. She realized what she had done but no. No, it was one thing to say what she had. But it was one thing to dismiss someone altogether, especially someone who was trying. He sounded too much like him, not the rusted knight or the hero that saved her. How dare you? That's it, little snowflake, crack that ice. Ruby is brash, she's reckless, she's young and inexperienced, but she is not someone to be dismissed. She earned her way here like any other, and loath as I am to admit that, she deserves to be here. Maybe not as a leader, not yet. But she is as skilled as any other in combat, she can strategize like any huntsman as opposed to she has enough talent to make it into Beacon 2 years early. He tilted his head, trying his best not to smirk as he looked at her, dead in the eyes. He needed to test it. Was this an act? Was it not you who said Ozpin made a mistake? What if his mistake was bringing Ruby here? He flicked his eyes to the shadow outside his door. Someone was listening in. He could feel the anger, the hurt, the sadness. Two shadows. Ruby must be listening in with someone. I hope she stays to listen. As for Weiss, she stared at him with a shaky gaze as he turned her words back on her. Aye. Yes, Miss Schnee. It disgusted him to act like this. He felt like Danzo. But it needed to be done. Did he go too far? No, there it was. Something set in Weiss like a winter chill, and even her gaze held that cold ice to it. I did. And I was wrong. He was glad she didn't hear the gasp of shock behind the door just a little more. But before he could speak, he was cut off by two palms slamming into his desk nose to nose with the heiress. His mistake was ever hiring a disgusting man like you. If you can't see the potential in that girl, then you don't deserve to be a teacher. I will be reporting this to Ozpin and placing a formal complaint. You're no teacher. You're just a bully. Okay. So she did have that spark about her too. As she turned and walked away, he waited, just waited until she had grabbed the doorknob before speaking again. Those who break the rules are naught but scum, but those who betray their comrades are worth even less. She stopped. Something in those words, something in that voice. As she turned, she saw blue eyes had become such a vibrant green on the other side. A raging blonde stopped as her sister, eyes puffy and red, listened in too. He knew. And he continued. That was the lesson my teacher first taught me. The first half of my life's promise to myself, the second. Fight for what I want to protect, fight to ensure it stays safe for me to see it another day. From one dead last, one dope, one dolt, speaking on behalf of another Miss Schnee. What you just showed me is what Ruby needs to grow. Support. Care. Belief in her as a leader. One only becomes stronger when fighting for something they care about, and you just struck a teacher and proclaimed disgust for someone who you couldn't even look in the eye mere moments ago. The anger still lay outside. Good. The more that they heard, the better. As he stood up, Weiss rooted herself to the ground in worry as she realized, yes, she had struck a teacher. She watched as he dragged his fingers over the pinwheel and then walked over to the picture of a young boy. If he was older, Weiss may have even admitted to be attracted to them. His dark hair and darker gaze held something else to them, however. Sasuke Uchiha. Heir and survivor to the Uchiha clan. When he was 7, his brother wiped his clan out and left him amidst the bodies. This time there was no hiding the gasps, but thankfully Weiss seemed not to notice. He was my best friend. My brother. But he always thought he was better than everyone else. He demanded power, he demanded wealth, he demanded it all, and he got it because he simply came from a name that others thought would be used to benefit them in the end. She wasn't dense enough to miss the point he was making. And when I showed greater talent, greater skills. He tried to kill me. This time she heard the others gasp, not really able to ignore it, as the others came barreling in through the door. Yang's eyes were as red as hate itself, Blake's cold as gold, but Ruby. She stepped forward. Weiss too came over to look at the photo. But he pointed, drawing attention to a second one of himself and Sasuke, much older. Naruto had used his clones under transformations to take a few pictures of his friends, so he had something to remember their faces by, but they did not need to know that. He looked between both girls and couldn't help but smile. They're so much closer to it than Sasuke and I ever were. I guess happier lives helps with that. I kicked his ass, of course, and continued to do so every time we met. We were always evenly matched, with him outclassing me in skill and me outclassing him in raw power. But the difference was that he never let go of his superiority complex, the need to be better. Even after killing his brother, the loud intake of air from Yang was his only warning before he moved out of the way of the girl's punch. She stood between them. Weiss looking at him in tears of horror and Ruby in shock. He shook his head. Glad that someone stepped in, as it would help prove his point. No Weiss, I don't. What I think is you come from a family that has expected far too much from you, far too much, and you have ended up living and speaking with someone else's words. I think the real you entered this room when you slapped me frankly. The real you? She went silent at that. He walked around Yang without a care and plucked a different photo off the wall, this one of a beautiful girl with lavender eyes. This is the difference between you and Sasuke. His real self was driven by fear and need to be stronger to stop his brother from taking anything else from him. He lived by the rule of Ichihas must be the best. Everyone told him exactly what he wanted to try and encourage him, but it just stunted him. Unlike her, it would take a deaf man to not notice the change in tone, the pain dripping from his words at the end there. Hinata Hyuga. Heiress to the Hyuga clan, older sister. Seen as kind, seen as gentle and treated like absolute shit for it. When sparring, she was always put up against overwhelming odds or her family, where she held back for fear of hurting them. She was the strongest Kun huntress of my generation. But she was always held back by her view of herself, never being enough, never being good enough for others. She even held back from loving the man her heart desired until it was too late. The pain in his eyes was as clear as glass. But sadly, not everyone was calm enough to listen to him at this point. He ignored how her fist clenched his collar or the red eyes glaring bloody murder at him. And how does this explain why you said that about Ruby? Where is any of this gone? Do you just want to fuck with Weiss's head? She's just protective, no need to get mad. He let out a small burst of the Senin chakra within him, watching as the girl blinked with lilac eyes and stumbled back only to be caught by him and gently placed on the chair Weiss had occupied before. He smiled and turned to the two. Silver and crystal eyes looking into his deep green. Deep with sorrow. Deep with sadness. An exhale of fatigue. A lie was needed to get Miss Schnee to start being truthful with both herself and I. I don't think a single thing of the sort about Miss Rose. If anything, I see enough of myself as a youth in her that seeing enough of both Sasuke and Hinata and you Weiss scares me. All four girls blinked, though only one had stayed silent enough to ponder the words from beginning to end. You wanted Weiss to get mad so she'd have no emotional shields up when you dropped this on her. And you knew we were outside and wanted us to hear. He snapped his fingers in Blake's direction, smiling. Bingo. I find ointment is best applied to a fresh wound, not an infected one. All four girls glowered at him for the act of playing them, something he could not fault them for in the end. They were just teenagers after all. Sitting on his desk and motioning to the photos, he prepared himself to drop the final bomb. Every single person you see on this wall except me is dead. The gasps and shock in their voice made him feel perhaps a little guilty. Rubies, but they were so young, brought up the feeling of pain in his heart. I've seen so many lives snuffed out and it happened because Sasuke wanted to fight with me to finally decide things when we were supposed to be saving them. Their looks of shock at him made his lips tighten. Some small part of him always did hold blame for Sasuke, but announcing it made him sick. He then looked Weiss right in the eyes. I tell you this. I got you mad, like this. And I compare you to them, like this, because you have so much potential being held back by what you expect your name and blood to bring you. Before you lead, you must follow. Before you follow, you need to accept your flaws and that you are here to learn. All four of you are. Yang, your temper could have cost this entire lesson and your career. Learn to hold back your emotions and pay attention to the full picture instead of what you think is right. The blonde look struck as he turned his attention to her, but could not deny he was right as much as she wanted to. Blake, you could have stepped in, but you listened. But sometimes you must learn to act. Think about acting first, yes, but you must act. If I had defended myself against Yang or Weiss, you would have been too late to do anything. Much like a certain shadow-wielding genius friend of mine. You need to learn to stop thinking when thought drags you down. She watched his eyes flick to a boy with hair much like a pineapple, with calculative eyes. Ruby. The four looked to the girl, whose tears had sprung anew and blinked as the man brought the girl in for a light hug. You already know my lesson. And I am sorry you had to hear my lies that were meant for Weiss. I meant it when I said I see some of myself in you, and I know how hard it is when friends doubt you. My only lesson to you is to believe in your light as Team RWBY's leader, it might guide them out of some dark places to come. Iridid nodded, mumbling a small utterance that none of them could make out in the slightest. When he turned to Weiss, however. She sighed and nodded. He smiled in kind. Stop being a Schnee and start being Weiss. That was all that was needed. It would be hard, as it was to get Sasuke to stop being an Uchiha or Hanabi to stop being a Hyuga. But they had years to learn and grow. He clapped his hands together, smiling as he began to lightly push them out of his room. Now go on. It's 1 in the morning and I don't want any teachers wondering why there are 4 girls out of bed at this hour in a young male teacher's room. He laughed at their spluttering red faces and thankfully closed the door before a blonde's fist could hit him, and then he let the tears fall. But he smiled. Looking back to the 2 photos of his friends. Even now, you 2 are helping me. When will I ever stop relying on you for my words and my strength? He was completely unaware of the black camera in the corner of his room that was not there this morning. It had been a solid week since Naruto had spoken to Team rwby in his office, and strangely enough, he could happily say that he had not experienced such damn peace and quiet since he entered this damn world to begin with. The days had been rather slow, with no other students requiring his guidance, but that was okay for him. The first session he had ever truly given was, well, as Glinda put it, far too impersonal and informal. Not many other tutors hugged their students after all. She couldn't hide the smile that came up on her lips when she told me off for that though, the big softie. It made him glad to know that the act of showing affection for his students was not as weird as she was making it out to be. After all, with Iruka, Kakashi and Jiraiya as his examples, he was shocked he had gone the week without getting fired for some kind of inappropriate act of violence or otherwise. Currently, the blonde was enjoying his time off from the office that had been dubbed Doc Yuzu's clinic by none other than Yang Xiaolong herself to boot. A form of revenge for playing on her temper. A playful show of forgiveness. Who was to say? What he could say was he never knew the sun could be so warm despite living in the land of fire. The sun in this world just felt brighter on the sunniest of days when compared to the heat of his homeland. He looked down at the frozen treat in his hand, a simple ice cream cone, smiling as he looked beyond it to see the students milling about. He already realized he was showing off sides of Sakura, Kakashi and Sasuke within him when he agreed to open up his office to any student who needed him. From Sakura's want to help, Kakashi's need to prevent others from living his experiences, and Sasuke's misguided sense of needing to protect others from threats only he understood. There was this growing sense of a need to be useful in his heart. He thought back to the night after Team rwby's impromptu session. Ozpin had come to him with a question, a small tiny question: why did he mention the old world? It was indeed a question that even Naruto did not know the answer to. Was he trying to ensure his loved ones went on to be understood and remembered? Was he trying to connect to them again through stories of their lives? Part of him didn't want to know it was his choice, he made it. With a heavy sigh, he kicked off the railing that he was standing on and let his body fall backwards. Never once dropping his frozen treat as he let a number of vines catch and lower him to the ground behind the dorm rooms, giving a wave to 1 or 2 of the students who noticed him. No need to hide my powers in a world where these unique skills come in all shapes and sizes. It was so freeing. From a world of secrets to a world of freedom. Sure, they're grim to deal with, but he had his own way of handling them. His mind flashed back to what Ozpin had told him before. That the pure Grimm he had managed to make back in the Emerald Forest had been found as rich and bountiful flowers later that day. Since then, he had made it a habit to send out clones in the night to help purify these bundles of everything wrong in nature. Feeling all the better for it each time. Sometimes he would have to kill them, there was no stopping that, but the fact he had free reign to choose was the blessing. Choice, something he was denied so much of in the past. Choice over Kurama. Choice over his childhood. Choice over Akatsuki. Here he was free, and he loved it. Good morning, Professor, he blinked and smiled, offering a wave to the student that had greeted him. More greetings followed suit, and he returned them in kind as he walked in the direction his feet had chosen. Sage, he loved that word. Here he barely felt a day over 18, despite his more advanced age in truth. Not that it mattered. Why would it? He was as young at heart as he was in body. Good morning, Doc. He let out a chuckle as he finished up his frozen treat just in time to catch a ball thrown at him from afar, returning it with just enough force to land it in the chest of the one who had tossed it at him, gaining a forceful oof for his efforts. Okay. Maybe he was a bit older at heart. These kids, they had no idea how young they truly were. In the place of young adults, he saw genin students much like his own generation. But that was musing for another time. He sighed at feeling his scroll buzz, snatching the device up and placing it to his ear as he began walking with a smile back towards the school. Hello, you've reached Doc Yuzu, leave a message after the awkward pause. The silence that followed made Naruto blink a bit, even slowing in his walk. Mr. Uzumaki? He blinked. Who was this? The voice sounded so timid, so small. So hurt. He looked around and immediately began hurrying back to the school, back to his room where his gear was. Yes, I am he, what's the matter, miss? He continued to walk, nimbly dodging around students and then back around to his side of the dorms before a vine from the nearby tree worked to lift him up to his window. Well, you see, my name is Velvet. Velvet Scarlatina, I'm a second year. He stopped midway of clipping his belt around his torso, scroll pinned to his ear. Second year, they weren't supposed to contact him. Sigh, Miss Scarlatina, you know the rules as to contacting me. My services are for the new generation only, they needed Martha. I'm being attacked by racists in this school every day and I'm afraid for my safety. He stopped, he frowned. He looked out the window and out to the still rising sun, being attacked for something outside of your control, now that he understood. Faunus. He heard her breath hitch on the other side of the scroll and sighed. If that's a problem, I can hang up. No need miss, no need Velvet. I can make an exception if you felt the need to come to me. However, as my office is in the new student's dorm room, I am going to need another place to come find you. Do you have somewhere in mind? He heard the ruffling of clothes and hair on the other side, and it took him far too long to realize the girl was so frazzled she had nodded to a phone call. And that would be? Sorry, would it be possible if we met down in Vale? It's my team's day off and I'd feel better not here, in Beacon. Again, he understood just fine. He nodded and smiled, feeling his scroll buzz as he looked at it to see a dainty little coffee shop near foot of Beacon actually. A 5-minute bullhead ride if anything. I assume you're already there since the photo says live under it. The silence that followed was palpable before he heard her mutter. He med. And leaned in closer to the microphone. They do really nice carrot cake, he just chuckled. The girl hung up on him before he could say he was on his way, and so he sighed. Of course he would be on his way. He had a soft spot for the beast folk of Remnant after all. Anne's. The journey down to the coffee shop, aptly named Beacon Brew and Beans, or B3 as those he had asked for directions had told him, was not a hard one. He could definitely see the appeal of the small shop for himself. Be it the outdoor garden around its left side or the balcony on its second floor. And on said balcony, he spotted her twin twitching bunny ears. Right. Carrot cake. Of course. With a smile he entered, giving a slight wave to the barista as he walked past her and upstairs to the balcony with a hum to his steps, surprised to see a second plate of said cake already waiting for him with a chilled glass of iced tea as well. The girl was sending looks towards him while trying not to make it too obvious, so he walked over and sat down with a calm pace so as not to draw attention to the girl. Velvet Scarlatina, I assume. The girl, Velvet, nodded as she took her drink and sipped it with a shaking grasp. It did not take Naruto long to see that the girl had a worried look to her, constantly watching the street for some reason unbeknownst to him. Wait. 2 signatures, 6 o'clock, disgust, and 2 more, directly below us, also disgust. The fact the feelings were directed at Velvet and not himself only served to set him further on edge. But the fake stretch of the morning yawn variety, he took in their faces as he arched his back and bent his neck. Team CRDL. He had already been warned that their leader was offending the leader of Team JNPR on a casual basis, but until reports were made or proof was given, he technically couldn't do anything to stop them. Technically. Glinda was always quick to stop him, but a hinged clone with an eraser was quite painful if given enough time to aim. It seemed however that the boy had not learned his lesson. He looked over to her, seeing she too had spotted them and had frozen herself to the spot. That would not do. He placed his scroll down and smiled, typing away on it. Oh Glinda. It seems Team CRDL is on the prowl again, harassing one of my students. If they have time to do that, they have time to get in some extra endurance practice with Miss Nikos today, don't you agree? Professor Uzumaki. Her reply didn't take too long to come back to him. While I do not wish to address your casual dismissal of my requests to stay professional in our correspondence, Professor Uzumaki, I do find myself agreeing with you. I will be sure to request them within the minute, I assure you. Please do be gentle with the student in question, no rwby situations, Professor Goodwitch. That woman. She obviously knew how to play the game, applying disapproval, agreement and disapproval in a sandwich to make it seem like she wasn't helping when she so obviously was. The woman was turning out more like Tsunade every chance they had to speak, and he did not want it any other way. 4 simultaneous buzzes drew the flick of Velvet's ear, as did their groans and arguing of how unfair it was to be called in on their day off. He definitely did not focus on how much her smile reminded him of Hina's. Thank you, he smiled and shook his head, taking up a fork and dipping it into his treat as he motioned for her to speak. No Miss Scarlatina, thank you for the cake now. Go on. Tell me what's been troubling you. And boy did she tell. And boy did he regret telling her too. Ans. To say Naruto was pissed was an understatement. The things Velvet had told him had led his blood to boil, and his sage chakra was currently working overtime to lead him to not pound the skulls in of anyone he felt, showing signs of bigotry towards the young woman as he stormed up to the doors of the man he so wished to speak to. Bang. 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 Ozpin, open up. The sound of anger, such raw anger coming from Doc Yuzu, had many students stopping both inside and outside the academy as the man's voice echoed out across the hallways. Poor Velvet was living up to her namesake with a heavy blush across her face, which only got deeper as the man in question opened his office door with a disapproving look. Mr. Uzumaki. If you are done acting like a barbarian, perhaps you and I can handle this peacefully. Nope. In he went, dragging the bunny girl with him as he slammed the office door behind him and walked right up to the desk the old man used, slamming down a notebook on it before pointing at it expectantly. Read. Have a look at what you and your faculty have been ignoring because of wanting to keep up a good image for your school. Of course, Ozpin knew nothing of the sort when it came to ignoring anything that could bring such a fury to light in the calm sage. He turned his gaze to the student, a small whimper leaving her as she bowed her head and began muttering apologies, a sign that something indeed was wrong. Miss Velvet, have I ever put myself across as someone to apologize to if there is a problem? She blinked and looked up at him, shocking him that there was honest-to-brother's fear in her eyes. Well no sir, but I was told not to bring this to you, as it wasn't important enough to warrant your attention. Strike 2. Whoever told her this was not speaking on his behalf. He narrowed his eyes as he walked over to his desk to read from the notebook, not ignoring how Naruto went over to the girl and hugged her. Not like Ruby, apologetic and gentle. But fierce. Protective. And she gave into it as if relaxing for the first time in a long while. He saw her give in to the soft and gentle ministrations of Naruto's palm atop her scalp and how he worked to avoid the girl's ears. The ears he could now see had makeup on them to hide the bruising. Shhh, it's okay. We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise. It's not your fault, none of this is your fault. Second-year huntsman in training or not, she was still just a child compared to the evils of the world. And as he turned his gaze towards the paper, he remembered just how close to home those evils could be. Counselor's notes. Doctor. He did not remember giving the boy that title, but he would let it slide. Below lies a testimony from the lips of one Velvet Scarlatina. Rabbit Fronis and member of Team CFVY. Detailed in it are the actions of Team CRDL, made up of Carden Winchester, Russell Thrush, Skylark and Dove Bronzewing. The victim. His eyes widened as he noted that Naruto had gone as far as to refer to Miss Velvet as a victim in these notes. Has stated to me that these 4 alone have been a cause for concern in the first week of term here at Beacon Academy, with an onslaught of racist and overly offensive behavior. Compiled of non-consensual grasping of sensitive Fronis traits, i.e., Miss Scarlatina's ears as well as a number of numerous other Fronis's tails, horns, ears and in one particularly shocking case, the hair of a lioness Fronis here on Beacon grounds, of both second and first year generation. The man-side racism and hostile, borderline assault on Fronis members was not anything new in today's world, what with the White Fang around to ensure that the fear of the beast folk species would lay heavy in the hearts of the hateful. Just as he turned to look his new employee in the eyes and explain how he could do no more than a slap on the wrist for a first-week offense, he was caught off guard by the eerie green glow coming off those eyes. Maiden. Nonsense. Naruto was a man, impossible to gain the power of one of his daughters. But the stare said it all. To not stop. To continue. He did so, and his heart went cold at what he read next. When attempting to report the students in question to a member of Vale Police for their racist and borderline offensive acts of molestation of sensitive Fronis traits, Miss Scarlatina was reportedly told to shut her screaming howler before a real man shows her what true racism looks like. She was then arrested for charges of disturbing the peace of Vale, and if not for her teammates, would have faced those charges in a court of her peers. According to her research, similar actions befell the affirmational Fronis victims above. It is my belief that Team CRDL is either wrapped up in something they do not know of or that they are being protected by someone with the money and the power to manipulate the VPD. My claims are backed up only by the provided photo of a note the victim had delivered to her dorm when alone, stating that she should be a good bunny girl and take whatever the humans give her. Frankly, Ozpin. The man turned to look at Naruto, seeing the notes were addressing him directly now. Ozpin did not need to hear the rest. He walked up to the two and gently placed a hand on Velvet's shoulder with a smile. Miss Velvet. I would like you to go find Professor Goodwitch and make sure she knows about this. She will help get you seen to by a nurse who can help all those nasty bruises. The girl nodded, looking to Naruto who smiled and waved her out of the room, not before getting a hug so tight from the girl that he thought his back would break, as well as a whispered desperate thank you. As the girl ran off down the hallway, the door locking behind her, he turned with his smile gone to what he was glad to see was an equally furious Ozpin. Just say the word Oz and I'll find them. He shook his head, walking back to the desk as Naruto grew angered at what he assumed was a dismissal. And why not? Because any official backlash in defense of a Fronis would be seen as White Fang support. I cannot be seen announcing a manhunt to find whoever is threatening my students. If our suspicion of political power is correct, the anger dissipated as Naruto took in his words and smirked. Look between the in-between. Official backlash. Cannot be seen. Political power. The blonde nodded, looking at his scroll with a sigh of frustration. Oh, damn it. Would you look at the time? It seems I have further work to do in Vale. I'm afraid I likely won't be back until tomorrow morning, sir. Will you be needing me for anything until then? The man shook his head, leading Naruto to open up the door to his office and begin to walk out. How useful was Miss Rose in your new weapon, Professor Uzumaki? Naruto just let off a small chuckle. One that would have made Kurama proud. Oh, she was just perfect, Oz. I look forward to its upcoming test run. Vale was a fickle bitch, her dark underbelly like the underside of a brick in the midst of the dirt where the spiders lie and the insects crawl. Where the hunters lay till darkness rises to come out and play amongst the prey. The moonlight from shattered skies lay above in silver clear, raining down on golden streets filled with furious hearts full of endless fear. He here stood in the one warmth he could find amongst these streets in a world that he still did not know. Calling it home, well, he did not understand anything outside its four walls. The blonde scoffed. What a filthy city. He could feel the hatred dripping off of every single heart here in these concrete streets. Order up. Ooh and miso ramen, one side of extra pork, and hold them in mahay. Dude. Come on. No reading at the stand, your food will get cold. Naruto looked up from his newly purchased book and smiled. Letting his fingers slide over the paper as he placed it back into his pack with a chuckle. That was close. He nearly went into some kind of private detective mode, then sitting in a little stand not far off from a nearby dust shop, named A Simple Walk, the blonde was taking a small break from his time at the office before his search tonight for the unknown he was supposed to be hunting down. Grabbing the chopsticks to his left and snapping them apart. He noted how one person down the bench flinched at the sound. Scaly cheeks, eyes looking around a lot. Gecko. Iguana. Chameleon. He shrugged, taking his first bite of the heavenly noodles that had been bestowed upon him. Not as good as Ichiraku, but the charm was there. The love poured into the food wasn't. This was obviously more about earning money than the craft, but he could understand that. Still, the broth worked to fight off the chill around him that night. His eyes flicked over the streets behind him, noting how everyone seemed afraid of something, but not anything in particular. He even had to lower his sage mode, else he find himself taken aback by the feeling of raw negativity in the city. No wonder Grimm were surrounding the forests if they had this feast right next door. A little burst of his seinen mode, and he almost felt like being sick right there at the table before he gathered a hold on it. The grip of fear was in every damn thing for miles at this point. Some were hiding it well, but sage above, where did it all come from? Well, he knew where. White Fang, Grimm. Threats outside and within the home. It would send anyone into a state of worry. Tossing the money for his ramen, plus extra, onto the counter. The blonde stood up and stretched before beginning to walk away with a wave to the one who had made his meal for the night. 10 p.m. And oddly the city felt more alive than it had during the day. Although in the same way that soil seems more alive when you disturb an ant's hill. First things first. Police station. Velvet had tried to report Cardin to the authorities and received threats of false charges. Charges that would have gone through if not for her team leader threatening to tie up the station in lawsuits. If there's a paper trail to follow, it'll be there. Come on, shinobi training, don't fail me now. The blonde ducked into an alleyway. Kicking up off a dumpster before running straight up a wall and over the corner. His hinge dropping in a cloud of smoke. In the place of his normal battle uniform, he had on him a classic Lee Fanbu set. Another borrow from the Konoha Museum of Heretics. Sitting on his face there lay to the side, a porcelain mask with his sensei's old wolfish markings across it. His cloak hiding most of the classic issued armor. But not a strange bulge in the cloak at his side. One he patted lightly before beginning to walk from rooftop to rooftop. Bounding across edges as a shadow under moonlight. Oh yeah, totally keeping that. Shadow under moonlight. Take that, Sasuke, you aren't the only one who can be all cool and mysterious. From rooftop to rooftop he hopped. Feet lighter than a feather thanks to the application of chakra underfoot. He raised an eyebrow as he noted some things below him. Couples in alleyways thinking they were discreet in particular. Well, if there's one way to fight back the fear, it's that. He chuckled to himself as he cartwheeled over a particularly large gap, looking down to see a strange man with orange hair. And does that girl have pink and brown hair? Cool. When he landed, he turned on his foot and was surprised to see the same girl. Right. In. Front. Of. Him. She looked at him with a slow blink, her eye colors changing with the act. Hello. No. Stupid Naruto. Ninjas do not hello to strangers with teleporting powers. He was thankfully happy to see that the girl just smiled at him, her parasol at her side as he walked around her slowly, like circling an angry dog. He smiled and turned to walk away when he got to the other side. Only to yelp when she appeared in front of him again. He turned to look behind him, spotting only shattered glass in the wind. What the fuck? He turned to look at her again, blinking as he noticed she was gone. Then he felt something from his pocket get lifted off of him, turning to look at the same girl sitting on a nearby chimney with was that his scroll. She was typing on it. The notes page clearly open as she smiled and turned it towards him. Your mask looks weird, P. He spluttered in shock, feeling his ear tips get red under the hood of his cloak as he walked right up to her and went to grab the scroll from her hands, only for her body to shatter the moment he made contact with it. He could have sworn he felt her amusement, turning to see her on the rooftop's edge with his scroll again in hand. "I want one. Where do I get one?" Was that it? She wanted an Anbu mask. He slowly reached behind him to where he kept the seal on his tailbone that held the scroll with all his most precious items in. "You want a mask, alright, why don't you just take one of mine and did the night just get colder?" He blinked, reaching up to grab his face and paled slightly as he felt the cold wind on it. The shattering of more glass drew his attention as he looked to see the pink-haired she-devil had disappeared, now 2 rooftops over with his mask on her face. She held up a scroll on it, a picture of a cat. And a mouse. His eyes narrowed, and despite himself he couldn't help but frown at the girl. Cat and mouse, eh? Fine. He'd just have to go easy on her, no reason to ruin a young girl's fun or her health, after all. But he would be getting Kakashi's mask back, he just had to make sure not to break it in the act. The tingling in the back of his head let him know something was wrong, but the onslaught of negative emotions and unfamiliarity with life forces in this world made it hard to not get dizzy with the expanded senses of his sage chakra within the city. It's the old-fashioned way then. Without hesitation, he kicked off the rooftop and shot across the gap, reaching out and closing his fingers down around the mask, eyes narrowed at the girl as he noticed the smirk on her lips as he ripped it from her face again, shattered glass under his grip, that tingling getting a bit stronger this time before it faded. Sage, damn it, what the hell? It's like fighting Haku all over again. This time his eyebrow twitched as he turned to the next rooftop where he heard a parasol tapping against concrete, her masked face tilted to the side. No, there has to be something else going on. I can't get a lock on her position, it's like she's everywhere. He had to curse himself for never once practicing his genjutsu, noting how the glass was fading away. Neo. Where the fuck did you go? Neo was her name. By the way, she froze to the spot. He assumed so. Still, this was an opening and damn be he if he didn't take it. A flicker taking his place as he went and grabbed the mask from her for another shatter. Fucking illusions. This time the parasol tapped his shoulder and he was not going to go easy on her. He reached out to grab the item and was glad to feel his hand actually make contact as he pulled her in to grab at his mask. Only for her to slide between his open legs and flash his scroll with a smile. Betting faster, Whiskers 3. Though she was getting to him, she was smart and fast and she was getting to him. His hand snapped out to try and grasp the mask again. Only to change directions and snatch the parasol instead as he pushed instead of pulled to knock the girl off balance. It worked for about 2 seconds before she pulled on the lace umbrella and flipped over him, causing him to be pulled with it and end up flat on his ass. He grumbled something about pink-haired girls always having it out for him and went to look at her before he noticed she wasn't there. Any anger he felt at her quickly faded as what was simple annoyance at a stupid kid playing a prank quickly became far more real, far more panicked. His scroll, his mask, and her were gone. No way, I just got mugged. He scrambled to his feet, looking around in all directions for any sign of pink, white, that umbrella. Anything. Screw the scroll, he had just lost Kakashi's goddamn mask. The panic of losing one of the few things that connected him to someone he cared about was beginning to set in. The blonde starting to pace as he tried to think, to collect himself. But it wasn't working. A deep intake of sage chakra helped steady him, his panic overriding the dislike of the negative emotions in the air at this point in time. Even as they flooded his system and turned the ever-growing sense of panic in his heart into something different. Anger. Anger in the way one would be angry over someone defacing a grave. He felt his hands clenching down to the nail as he exhaled and let the sage take over. There. Hands. Little did he know of his observer. Neo. Having been standing right on the edge of the rooftop behind a chimney. She was about to go join Roman with her spoils. Before the sound of panicked breaths began to grow, she looked back, raising a delicate eyebrow at how the blonde began to panic with the loss of his mask, her eyes going to the item she wanted as a souvenir as one of her and Dum Dum's outings. Why was he panicking? It was just a trinket, wasn't it? She heard him mutter something under his breath, what on earth was a Kashi? But the more he began to panic, the more she began to stare, a morbid curiosity taking place before she sat down on the edge and began to observe him. Those rumpled up eyebrows, the screwed shut eyes, the way his armor stretched and rose with every deep breath he took, those shaking fists. And cue to panic in his eyes, the worry in his stride, it was what Neo lived for in the end. The feeling of power she had over someone else meant little when she could exercise her want to cause some form of emotion in others. Affectionate pride in her Dum. Anger and annoyance in Silver and the lesser illusionist. But this. She wasn't too sure she liked panic on Whiskers. It didn't suit him. The frown suited him, the anger suited him, she decided. She hummed and took the mask off of her face before sliding it along the ground towards the boy, letting it out of her illusion. And when he went to pick it up there. The anger. The blazing heat of the sun in his eyes. That was the emotion that she felt fit him best. But just as she went to stand and leave. She felt something strong close down around her wrist and hold her to the spot. It was him. His eyes now green. Such a strange green, his eyes changed like hers. They looked so deep, so hard into her own, and she couldn't help but smile. "Got you, little mouse," she went to engage her semblance. Slipping out of his grasp while leaving a copy in her place, did his eyes just follow her? She blinked. Then dashed in the opposite direction, running across the rooftop to the next with a dainty leap. Only to blink as another him followed her. She looked back to hers. Two hims. A step to the side, a plummet down to a lower rooftop, and now there were three hims. Three hers. Her eyes widened slowly, and then a grin broke out across her face. Her sisters and her lifted up their scrolls, even as the blonde fixed his mask to his scowling face. All three of them. The words clear in the blue light. "This just got fun 3. Of course Naruto could feel that the woman's intentions had changed rather quickly. A playful sadism in her heart, now full-blown malicious intent mixed with playfulness, hammered against his senses through the act of his sage mode, and he was not having it. Playtime was over. 3 became 6. 6 became 12. Only one was real and he knew which one. Same as his own clones, a pickpocket and a prankster able to make fake versions of herself or her surroundings. It was like facing some weird mix of himself and Itachi, and that alone made him weary. When the schlink of a dagger's point came out of the umbrella, weary turned to caution, and caution turned to cold, unrivaled numbness. He felt himself reaching for a kunai pouch he no longer carried, old instinct pulling him along in the presence of a sharpened blade, meant for only one thing: to kill. Another clack of nailed fingers against the screen caught his attention. A 13th Neo with a scroll now. His eyes narrowed behind their porcelain mask when she showed the screen to him. "How about a new game? I call this one Last Man Standing." Some deeper part of Naruto sneered at the girl from behind his mask. She had played him with illusions because his sage mode was weakened. She had stolen from him because he wanted to be nice and entertain her request for a mask. She had the audacity to stand there with that smirk of someone who enjoyed pain, with sadism dripping off of her like water off a freshly splashed cliff. If he had anything to say about it, there would only be one man standing. And one is a crumpled heap on the ground. His head repeating the same mantra. "She's just a kid, don't kill. She's just a kid, don't kill." His eyes widened as she opened up the images on his scroll and scrolled through them, coming to one of Kakashi's portrait with his mask on. Before smiling, she pointed at the mask. Then dragged a finger across her own neck and laughed. The cat glowered at the mouse as his claws finally came out. With a silent battle cry, his clones rushed against her copies as the two ringleaders stood with rooftops apart, their miniature war taking place across each house and shop between them. Neo was quick to notice how her own copies were not just outpowered, but outclassed. Secretly glad that despite the chaos being caused around her, both he and her had thankfully seen the wisdom in not using any loud firearms or otherwise, in case they drew attention, one from the public and the other from her dum-dum, who she knew would never let her live down taking on a fucking huntsman for jokes. She narrowed her eyes. As each copy of her and she herself dissolved into naught but glass on the wind. Each of his clones stopped in place, their fists or legs outstretched in attacks that seemed not to impact anything. Seconds passed. She watched them share looks in attempts to try and discern where she had gone as each of her copies got prepared with their parasols. As she went to strike the original, she saw it. The flash of green from under the mask before she felt her copies getting slaughtered. Each of him moved individually, causing her to wince on the feeling of each one being destroyed as he batted her distracted strike away with his hand and gripped her collar. "It took a while, but I found out which one was you, Neo. And now, you're gonna find out why no one steals from me." The strike of a heavy blow to the stomach caused the girl's eyes to widen as she bent over the first in her gut, thankfully shattering as one of her copies took the full force of the blow from her. Between them, clone smashed clone, copy popped copy. But Neo felt it. She had held the advantage in the beginning, a simple snatch job turned very bad as this man's head followed her over every layered illusion, picked her out of any crowd she formed with those damned copies of his. Each time she jumped to another rooftop, there he was with his fist inches from her face. Each time she swapped with a copy for her health, she heard each of his clones turn to him. Much like the mouse, she began to notice how much of a hunter this cat was. The girl flooded her semblance for all she had. Copies rushing at the man as she turned and ran with the full speed her semblance, her aura, would allow her. But then she heard the crashing. She heard the shattering. Barely 3 rooftops away. She turned and looked. She watched until smoke and glass had cleared from the area she left him at. In his hand a jet black staff with a purple glow and a ball of blue light in the other hand. "No need to hold back if they're just copies," she heard him say. Almost as if to himself rather than her. He had her. He had her and he knew it. Casually hopping from rooftop to rooftop until he came to land on her ground. His head tilting to avoid a stab from her parasol that now shone red with something that felt too much like sage chakra dust, so she was getting serious, was she? The minerals seemed to be sprinkled across the blade. An easy solve as he took her by the collar and smashed his knee against her stomach. If she was not mute, she was sure that she would have screamed from the pain. A rib or two, broken as her aura flickered under the blow. He reached down to pluck his scroll from the ground, narrowing his eyes at its feeling pink shards fell as he crushed it in his grasp. The girl in front of him doing the same before a panting Neo with her hand on her side came out from beside the chimney at the end of the roof. He heard muttering below the roof someone had noticed them. The hardened, scared but hardened look on the girl's face told him that she had noticed the same. But in that moment, her eyes blinking slowly, lilac eyes stared back at him. Perhaps it was luck, trick of the light, it was just what she needed. In his haze, Naruto saw not a girl on the rooftops of Vale, but another illusionist he hated so much. Then he saw her. Hina. The love that never was. Anger left his system in moments as he stared at her. Even reaching out, pain overriding sense. The pain of being stabbed, however, did not. With sage mode dropped, he looked down to see the blade of the parasol wedged into his armor. Thankful that the blade had only slightly penetrated the Kevlar that the Anbu wore. But that was it. She had used Hinata's face. She had stolen Kakashi's mask and mocked his death. He had had enough of her. In hindsight, the sage should have wondered just what was driving him to such anger over information the girl would not have known. For Neo. She had to watch as the earthy green behind those eye slits became lighter, sicklier. Like poison in an infected wound. Then, she screamed a silent scream as the boy grabbed his staff and let his anger loose against her. He grabbed her wrist to prevent her from pulling her blade out and then brought it down against her arm, the crack of her wrist bringing her pain to newer heights. She attempted to return fire with her other hand. Pulling an emergency knife from her thigh to try and stab into the blonde, only for his bare fucking hand to shatter its steel body with one strike. She watched, stuck in slow motion as those green eyes rose to look at her own. And felt fear in her heart as those fragments floated in the air around his hand. It was like she had found her perfect counter. Clones to face against her copies, fake weapons formed from some kind of semblance to handle her sneaky nature of ambush. Skin that blades could not pierce or slash when he was prepared, and that damned sense. Was this karma for leaving Roman to deal with Little Red on his own or something? Finally pulling her weapon free. She struck with panicked swiftness, stabbing forward only for him to knock her weapon aside with a backhanded swipe. Knocking her ripist aside too with the other side of his staff. A pre-cracked and panicked copy of hers formed from behind him, snapping his attention to it as he lunged out and grabbed it by the throat, only to slam it into the ground and shatter it in the act. The light clinking caught his attention, the footsteps of a hurt foe running away from him being the only warning as he looked down at the quickly intensifying glow of a yellow crystal lightning shot out from the rooftop. Neo barely making it to the next as her clothes ended up singed by the bright flash. That was it. Her cover was blown to smithereens. She had to run, to go before the police got her. Thud. She slowly turned. And her eyes widened in horror. He was still here. The crystal should have at least paralyzed him with its shocking property, and she could see burns on him that were healing much faster than they should have. His cloak was ribbons and charred edges, but he himself was. She saw him remove the scuffed mask. His eyes as sickly green as they were moments ago before he placed the mask into his bag. You just damaged something very precious to me, Neo. Now tell me, where does someone get an uncut raw dust crystal that large when we're in the middle of a dust shortage? Of course she had been that reckless. She thought he would die or at least be knocked unconscious long enough for her to get away. But as the strength in her body left her and he approached from the edge of the rooftop, she noticed her options dwindling fast. As for Naruto, something felt wrong. This wasn't right, this wasn't okay. Why was he trying so hard to hurt someone that mere minutes ago he thought was simply playing a prank on him? It didn't make sense. Wretched thieves, they should all just die already. Did you hear about those fiends? Another dust robbery, bah, hang 'em up already. Fucking humans, we'd be better off if they were all dead. He stopped in his tracks, looking at the shaking, scared, bruised and bleeding foe he had just been fighting. He noticed she calmed down as he did, not knowing his sickly green eyes had shifted back to their comforting and earthy green. That was when Neo noticed it. It wasn't smoke rising from Naruto's form, it was Grimm Wisp. Sumi had to name it something. What was he? She no longer felt safe. She no longer felt okay. She looked behind her and gulped. One plan, and it was a risky one. As he came close, she waited. When his hand came out she flinched, and when he offered it to her, she smirked. He let out a cry of pain as his drop sage mode let in the bladed tip of her parasol. blood dripping down a point in his shoulder before he wrenched the weapon aside and, with that same angered sickly green rush of negative emotions, landed a heavy fist to the jaw of the multicolored girl, only to widen his eyes as he felt the crunch of bone and the loss of aura from the girl. Pink eyes turned hazy as consciousness left their owner, the girl flopping lifelessly over the ledge of the rooftop. Idiot. These people weren't like his own, they didn't have chakra to reinforce their bodies like his did. Not thinking twice, he leapt over the edge with a kick to its lip and shot down after the girl, catching her with a tight grip and holding her close as his back impacted the trash in the alleyway below. Well reinforced by Sage Mode. The fall still hurt and when his skull rammed into hard concrete, all he could do was groan before slowly sitting up, looking at the girl in his lap. His hand went to the girl's neck and while racing, he was glad to find a pulse there. He hadn't meant to kill the poor girl, only prove that she was messing with the wrong person. But something in him just kept pushing him forward. Had old instincts had kicked in and he sighed. He could still hear her friend calling for her, now frantically as sirens came around the corners of both roads leading to their position. 2 clones with a hinge jutsu served as cover. 2 large garbage cans now acting as his cover. Any further thoughts he could think of were halted by the sound of shattering. He looked down to see nothing. Nothing but his lap. He could now hear the voice of the orange-haired man shouting about how she got so hurt and to stop ignoring him. And in that moment, Naruto made a decision, eyes locked on the police cruisers just a few streets down from the alley he found himself in. He no longer liked ice cream. And if Lady Luck in his world was generous, then this world's one was a stingy bitch. The wizened eyes of the warrior from beyond death looked upon the scroll in his hands with a growing feeling of unease and frustration, a sigh upon his lips as he placed it down on his desk to look upon it with the comfort of a cup of vacuo dark roast in his grayso. To both his left and his right, 2 sets of eyes looked down at the same information he did. Even as a soft hand came around and flicked the information up to the main screen that hung from the ceiling of his office. A sip of his hot brew left the air silent until the figure to his left stepped in front of him. Yes, Glinda. Her narrowed eyes got even narrower at the casual mention of her first name. Professor Ozpin, I understand you are one for taking advantage of every angle you can get, seeing the best in people wherever you go. But why on Remnant are you letting that boy out on the city with the intent of what can only amount vigilante justice? He closed his eyes as her voice got progressively louder, ending off in the withheld shout he could feel straining against her diaphragm. I mean, look at this. The same area he told you he was going to investigate is now under lockdown for sounds of fighting, an unfiltered shock dust explosion. And 2 or more missing assailants that caused the damn thing. And I think we both know enough to not be so foolish as to simply string this up as a coincidence. As her voice trailed off, it did so with a simmering frustration under her tone. Oh, Glinda, never the one to stray from the official channels. You need to learn to loosen your grip on that riding crop before it snaps. In turn, Ozpin simply smiled at the woman and motioned for her to sit on the other side of his desk, something she did with great hesitation. He made sure to keep her there in silence for a minute. 67 seconds to be exact. Making sure to shush her with a finger as he sipped his warm comfort. Do you remember what that boy did in the Emerald Forest, Glinda? She nodded, her eyes narrowing once more as she thought back to the recording shown to her before then being deleted to prevent it being spread. I know I sent you out of the room back in our first meeting, but the truth is, that boy is just as, if not more interesting than me. Her eyes widened and her body stiffened, looking at the man in shock. Anyone in the inner circle of Ozma knew of what that meant. And in a moment of honest emotion, Glinda felt a spike of fear in her chest. She leaned in close, as if the uttering of her next words would bring about the end of her. Is he one of Salem's? The relief that flooded her as he shook his head in the negative nearly made the woman melt into her chair. Nearly. Glinda Goodwitch did not melt. I promised him I would not tell anyone who he is or where he comes from. But what he did that day is a sign that he could be an important piece to come in the war between myself and my love. The pain in the voice of her mentor led Glinda's eyes to finally soften. Not many knew of Ozma's regrets and pains towards the woman he had once called wife. But in the dead of night she heard the lament in words spoken only for him when he did not sense her outside his office door. The sound of him leaving his chair drew Glinda to watch him. Not attempting to follow as he walked to one of the office windows. What he did with the Grimm, Glinda, is nothing short of amazing. He removed the presence of darkness from them in their entirety and replaced it with something else. I have noticed him doing the same with particular students during his guidance sessions, and the changes in them come almost unnaturally. Miss Schnee is now acting as a tutor to Miss Rose. Miss Scarlatina actually requested a sparring room for herself and her team after Mr. Uzumaki left the school. Ozpin's eyes shone with a playful gleam as he turned to look at his friend of many years, smiling as he did. That boy, that man, is making changes in Beacon that I felt would take years to come. If he prefers vigilante justice to the political tape and webs of the spiders that take up our society, then let him play the part of the hero. For all the negativity that Salem's agents spread in our world, perhaps it's about time we had our own out there to spread a little good. By cutting out the tumors of our kingdom. Anne's motherfucking piece of half-digested fox shit, said Hero, grit his teeth as he pulled out the last fragment of beer-stained glass from his leg. Years of pain tolerance meaning nothing in the face of unending frustration from having to pull the glass out of the most awkward place on his body. For the first time since he left his homeworld, the boy was actually starting to regret not taking Sakura up on her medical lessons back when they were reunited in Konoha. He was thankful that a little application of water manipulation was able to clean up the bloody trail leading from the location of his less than graceful landing. Healing factor having already dealt with a stab wound in his shoulder, but less than helpful when it kept closing around the foreign object sticking out of his leg. The last clattering bit of fragmented bottle hit the ground as the boy groaned at the stinging sensation, followed by that damn itching as the wound closed up. A very quick application of water release washed his evidence down a gutter. Having managed to make his way back up to the rooftops a few buildings away. A quick hinge to look like a familiar old fire shadow in his past, swapping out the Hokage robes for a bedrobe, and the police that rushed the rooftops for evidence had simply passed him over, asking him to go back inside for his safety. He had done so, waited until they had cleared the area out, and now, here he was back on the roof with no one looking for him. Ozpin could keep his hunters. Ninjas win every time. As of now, Naruto took in a deep breath as he allowed the familiar calm of his sage chakra to flood his body and fill him from toe to scalp. The blissful touch of Gaia soothed his frustrated soul and let the blonde feel at peace once more, his mind going back to his plan that had been reduced to shit upon contact with the stabby ice cream. Step 1, leave beacon. That had been a success with the use of some wall walking. Step 2. Find the station. That was now a bust. Any attempt to go and find the station to silently enter and find out who had been defending the racist humans or paying off the police to act the way they were would now be twice as hard with the active forces looking for the mystery bomber. Sure, he could just hinge in, but that would just result in being dragged out and sent out on the case himself. He took in a deep breath, allowing the air to carry its soothing chill to his lungs, and then whipped out his scroll. Ozpin, things have gone tits up. I was ambushed by an assailant who tried to mug me and used an unstable shock dust crystal to try and incapacitate me. The explosion has shaken up the hornet's nest, there's no way I'm going to be able to infiltrate the station now. Professor Uzumaki. It didn't take long for the reply to come back, the blonde having applied a second hinge to take on his more casual clothing before descending to the streets. He walked down the road from the crime scene, mumbling to himself as he thought of what to do next, only for his scroll to buzz. He whipped it out a second time, reading with a growing feeling to rub his temples. Yes, Glinda and I are quite aware of the trouble in Vale this evening. Such a shame that Mad Bomber got away, but alas, your mission stays unchanged. Use your ID at a local hotel and book a room for the night, then continue in the morning. I am placing you on a week's leave. Glinda has agreed to take over your guidance role for the week, but I would hurry up and find whatever it is you are looking for. Her riding crop is beginning to look a little bent from your actions, Professor Ozpin. The frustration at knowing his investigation was all but fucked for the night, the blonde sighed and turned on a heel, heading to where he could see a sleazy, worn down, possibly roach-infested motel down the road. Why? Because right now he wanted to stay in a place that didn't ask questions. The act of purchasing his room was as easy as scanning his card and taking a key off the rack while a pudgy, sweat-drenched bouncer watched him from afar. Patting a rusty sawn off on his hip. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad. He made sure to bolt the door the moment he got into his room, glad to see it wasn't some piss-stained pit but a serviceable room on the road. Serviceable for someone who spent most of his time sleeping outdoors anyway. He did not bother to undress, afraid of what he would catch from the bed, instead laying his cloak down over the top and laying on top of that. His hand went to the familiar but still strange weight of his new toy on his hip, hand going over its grip and his thumb rubbing across its name as he smiled. Ruby had been ecstatic to see that her plans had gone well for the item, but his own modifications to it had proven just as important as hers in the end. He may have not needed a long-range weapon in terms of firepower. But he couldn't deny the fact that it felt good to have one for simplicity's sake. With a sigh, the boy laid his head down, eyes focused on the ceiling till sleep came to claim him. He'd find the bastard behind the crimes at Beacon soon. And then, well, his new toy would finally be broken in. Anne's Neo hurt. She hurt everywhere. That blonde bastard had broken so many of her damn bones, even with aura reinforcement, that she couldn't even walk more than 5 steps with her dum-dum before she ended up passing out from the pain. Her aura was at near zero, her body somehow even less than that. Her eyes stay locked on the ceiling of their little hideout as she heard the man she loved shouting at someone with everything he had. It was funny the man was an absolute coward when it came to these people, sassy but cowed instantly on most days. Not when it came to his little Neo though. Oh sure, she had him wrapped around her fingers. But she loved him all the same, not the romantic love, you know. More like the way someone loved a brother. Or an uncle. A bronkle. And I don't care what you're telling me, you silver shitbag. I want the bastard who did this to Neo found and dead, or you can count me and my resources out of this little game of yours. Got it? That's it, dum-dum, make sure they know not to fuck with Torchwick. God, these painkillers were amazing. The sound of something hitting shelves hitting ground, hitting something. Drew her attention, but she couldn't move to save her life. She blinked once, blinked twice as the sound of something hitting flesh came from the other room. Only for her voice to come out of it. Now Mercery, we need the distinguished Mr. Torchwick alive to finish his part of the deal. He knows better than to talk back now, he's been taught what happens, don't you, Roman? Oh, how she hated her. Hated her with a passion, an absolute coldness in the base of her heart. The groan of her dum-dum let her know what had happened, and she so desperately wanted to go in there and remove their eyes with her parasol. The sound of a door getting locked after multiple footsteps left the room drew her to worry when no other sounds came from within. Just as she was about to try and rip her IV out of her arm to go see to her dum-dum. Around he came. His lips split open, eyes swelling. His lovely white coat all torn at the shoulder. She frowned. He loved that coat. At least his hat was okay, he'd be doubly upset if his hat was destroyed. She watched as he dragged himself over, limping, to her bed and pulled up a raggedy old chair to sit down on. In his eyes there lay a fury. A true fury. One she had only seen once before. It made her so happy to see it for her, that anger for her. She watched as he put a pen in her hand. And held a notepad underneath its tip, that beautiful anger for her so bright. Tell me everything about this bastard. Anne's. So bright. Too bright. Too bright for this time of the morning. His hand came up to block the light shining in his eyes from the slit in the curtains, the blonde groaning as he felt the warmth of the spring sunlight slowly heating up his skin in the cold motel room. He slowly lifted himself from his bed with a deep groan, his armor-clad back cracking as he did, body of youth, yet he still felt his real age from time to time. A deep inhale and a grimace from that motel smell, and the beauty of sage mode clung to his body once more. And then came the hate. Like a hangover from hell, Naruto winced at the striking feeling of the negative forces of the city. Forcing him to once again tone down his sage chakra output to prevent himself from being bombarded by every single negative, racist, angry or otherwise bad emotion out there. If this continues, trying to find the culprit of these crimes in person is going to be a lot fucking harder. He flung his cloak from the bed over his shoulders, hinging into a rather accurate copy of a certain pineapple-haired lazybones from his home. No one had bothered to talk to or approach him as he took the key to his room down to the main desk to return it, nor as he left without answering any of the usual "did you enjoy your stay" routine. The benefit of looking like a lay bum was that no one thought you would be worth a conversation, something he intended on using to his advantage here in the daylight. After consulting his scrolls map for a direct line of transit to the police station, the blonde's eye twitched to learn that the rooftop of his battle with Stabby the night before had in fact been less than 2 buildings away the entire goddamn time. With all the neon lights of the city at that point, trying to pick out a police sign had been that much harder it seems. Alas, he did not want to waste more time in this state of annoyance. The approach to the station had been rather easy. A little too easy actually. Back home, this type of place wouldn't even let you near the back walls without being watched at every corner, and yet here he was, walking in through the front door. What wasn't easy was seeing what was inside Faunus. Nothing but Faunus. Sure, there was a human or two, but the ears and tails to count were almost too much, along with the sheer amount of hate, sadness, fear and loathing in the building. This is where Velvet had gone off to. Let go of me. His head shot around to see some poor kid, white hair and wolfish ears with a tail to boot, struggling as he was pulled aside to the wall of the station and slammed against it. His scroll was already in his hand, recording the incident as he went unnoticed. Frowning. The officer in question, a skinny shit with dark hair and sickly yellow eyes. Smirking as he pinned the kid to the wall. What's the deal, Astons? He's just a kid. The voice of another officer caught his attention, her visage being much more pleasant to look at, being a green-eyed, pale, smallish woman with hair as black as night. He stepped back to get them both in the frame of his recording. Thankful his hinge had hidden his scroll behind another scroll, its screen looking like texting rather than recording. The deal, Rook, is this little beast. The tensing of half the damn room did not go unnoticed. Was defacing a wall a few blocks from here with some White Fang propaganda. The thrashing of the teen's movement somehow got harsher at this, the blonde raising an eyebrow as the teen's fangs began to develop and extend. That was a memorial to the Faunus you bastards left to die in the shooting last week. Anything more the teen was going to say was brutally silenced by the shock of a taser forcibly applied by this Astons with a shout of semblance user. It took everything Naruto had to not ruin this chance to gain evidence by jumping in, and judging by the wave of hate he wasn't the only one holding back. He watched with an aching heart as the teen was taken away. Stopping the recording for now and sending it to Ozpin. The man would know what to do with such evidence of police brutality. His eyes narrowed as he watched the asshole walk back to his desk with taser in hand, not so subtly threatening to tap it against some of the rougher-looking fraunas in the station. With a slow nod, Naruto noticed something and smirked. He had found his way in. What if rwby watch Naruto and Sasuke vs Kaguya, and thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.